It is Monday, January 6, 2020. Unbelievable. It's 9 a.m., and this is the first regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council this year. So Happy New Year to everyone. If you would, please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
As we gather here today, we pray that we are ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to fellow citizens and to our community. May we keep in mind always the enduring values of life, exerting our efforts in those areas and on those things upon which future generations can build with confidence. Let us continue to strive to make a better world. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a motion, please, to approve the final agenda as distributed?
Motion to approve is presented.
Second.
Oh, here we go, vote. These darn buttons, I'm out of practice again. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is public comment. And do we have any? We do have some speakers. Mr. James Maloney. Yes, sir, if you'll just come up and say your name for the record and tell us what you'd like to say.
My name is James Maloney. I'm a resident on Carolina Avenue, and I'm sure all of you are aware of the situation there. If you've ever been to the post office, it is a two-way street, and only one car can go down that street due to a hedgerow, I would like to call it, or trees and everything, and two cars cannot fit. I live next door to there. I pull out of my driveway, I cannot see. It is a site issue, a very bad safety issue, and sloping asphalt going up to where the raised parking there is all crumbling. You pull out of the driveway from the parking lot of the sterile commons there, and it's all crumbling. Chunks of concrete get caught up underneath people's cars. This is very bad. You can't see going down the street. You pull up, walk out of my yard, cars are flying by. The trees are 20 feet high. I've seen town vehicles there trimming these trees. And I don't know if it's a right-of-way, private land. What is this? How come this is allowed to go on? Somebody is going to get seriously hurt there. And this has been there, I've been there 5 years, and nobody has addressed this issue at all.
Mr. Maloney, we'll have the town manager take a look at this after the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
The next speaker is James Neve.
Morning, my name's James Neef, and I'm here
Morning,
for the
sir.
same reason.
Yes, sir.
My residence is on Pearl Street, but I own income property on Otsego. I've had several of my renters complain about the same thing, just comment about it, that it's so hard to get by there. I'm friends with Mr. Maloney, so I'm at his house a lot. I'm at my rental property a lot, and I can't tell you how many times, you run into this. And then besides what he was talking about, there's also an old anchor from a power line sticking out almost into the road that's just sticking. I mean, it's a danger. And this is just insane that this is allowed. 5 or 6 years ago, I came in front of council to request a variance to raise my house up out of the flood zone. And almost didn't get that because it was felt that my front deck, 10 feet in the air, was too close to the street. I'm maybe 20, 25 feet away from the street. However, that was too close to the street. These trees are in the street. As he says, it's a 2-lane road that's down to 1.5 lanes. And arguably, Carolina is one of the busiest streets, side streets on the island with the post office there. So, I mean, it really makes sense to have that looked at.
Roger, do you have all the information you need from these gentlemen?
Yeah, I'll make sure they have my business card before they leave.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next person to speak is Lisa Van Dien or Van Dyne?
I'm actually here for.
Yes, ma'am, fine, thank you. She's not speaking now, she's going to speak. Item 9, is that the public comment or public hearing? Yes, Grandview. Grandview, yes, ma'am. The next speaker is Bill Veach, but Bill, are you here to report from Murph? Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that'd like to make public comment this morning? Anyone? Okay, sir, if you know what? Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Jim was saying about the variance he had to try and get and everything. I was putting a fence up between my property, and I was told I can't run that fence off to the road or the
Right.
edge of my property.
Right.
Now, why are these trees there?
Right.
You know what I mean? I couldn't get the fence that, I couldn't block the view.
We'll take care of it, Mr. Maloney. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is local achievements and recognitions. Joanne, I'd like to start with you.
Well, Happy New Year, everybody, and happy qualifying week also. This is the week where our community finds out who has stepped up to run for council, and I know that we all hope that it's a very positive campaign season and that it's informative so that another fine council is elected. And then Daphne is not here. I'll say it anyway, and maybe we can catch her in person. We want to give congratulations to Daphne Bircher, who is our community service administrator, and she was married over the weekend to her dear love, Bert Saunders. And there is an old proverb that the heart that loves is always young, and I think that we all hope that they'll share many years together, feeling very young because they have family, friends, adventure, health, joy, and love to share. That's all.
Thank you, Joanne. Roxanne.
I thought I would do something a little different today and not recognize a specific event or group, but recognize all the wonderful people of the island that I noticed over the holidays who were so polite in letting me and other people in and out of the traffic. I was telling Joanne earlier that I had driven down to Naples, and everybody was very aggressive down there and speeding and cutting people off. And over the holidays, I had seamlessly positive experiences with people on the island being wonderfully polite in the traffic. So thank you, islanders and visitors.
Great.
I would echo that, Rexanne. I've had nothing but positive experiences on the boulevard, albeit slow experiences, but everybody's been very nice about that and understanding, and it's passed. I want to recognize the Polar Bear Club. They have their annual Polar Bear Plunge on New Year's Day. That, like so many events here on Fort Myers Beach, started off as just a little thing, four guys wading into the Gulf on New Year's Day as a farce to the polar bear plunges up north. And now, of course, it's 15 years later, it's morphed into this huge event every year, which is a lot of fun, but on the more serious side, every year they pick a charity, and this year was a bartender down at the other end who was taken ill with cancer and had all sorts of operations and chemo and so forth. So he was the beneficiary that day of the fundraising. So to the group, I say congratulations and keep up the great work. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just take a moment. Daphne, if you just want to stand up a minute. She's the one with the glow. And
Glow.
I think
The
you
wedding
heard us
glow.
say that we all congratulate you, and we're just thrilled for you and Bert, and wish you so well. Go to the other one, or whatever.
For the record, Daphne Saunders, I would like,
There you go. Okay,
I would like
was
to thank
wondering.
you. Yeah, I would like to thank you all for participating, Counselor Joanne and Butcher for coming down and being with us. So thank you so much, and thank you for the acknowledgement.
Good for you. Congratulations. Bruce, anything?
Yeah, just make a comment about the fireworks on New Year's Eve. I went down to the beach and watched them. They seemed to be done well. I noted that there wasn't a lot of public fireworks on the beach like there are on 4th of July. I guess maybe it was late or people were getting a little more sensible. And I hope everything went well up at Times Square. I haven't heard anything otherwise, that it wasn't quiet up there and safe. So congratulations on the fireworks.
I was representing all our residents from Wisconsin at the Rose Bowl this past week, and though it didn't quite turn out the way many of us hoped it would, it was quite extraordinary. And you know, when you look at these young men who, you know, one of our residents actually has a son on that team, and you look at the passion that they have, it's really inspiring. It was a dream come true to attend that. And then on another note, speaking of sons, I would just like everyone to please keep in their thoughts and prayers all the young men and women who have been deployed recently. We have several residents, people here at Town Hall whose families have been affected, and just keep them in your thoughts and prayers, will you? That's all I have. And Happy New Year. The next item on our agenda is Advisory Committee items and reports, and the first is Anchorage Advisory, and that's you, Kathy. I heard you say you twisted your ankle, Kathy. You're walking well for that.
That was Thanksgiving, so
Oh,
I
for
hope.
heaven's sakes. You're good to go.
Well, more or less. Kathy Light, Chair of Anchorage Advisory Committee. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year to you, too, Kathy.
I submitted a report. I hope everybody got it.
did.
So do you have any questions for me, or how would you like
Well,
to go
let's-
ahead with this?
Questions, Joanne?
Well, yes, I had a conversation with the upline service provider.
Yes.
Who had indicated the potential of an additional bathroom and shower available there. So I was just wondering if perhaps Austin from staff, under the direction of the town manager or whatever, might speak to that upland provider and see if that's a possibility immediately for the season.
Yes, after I was here at the last meeting, Doug Spear-Smith was here, and he caught me in the hall and mentioned that, and I talked to Chelsea, and he had also mentioned that to her, and that's as far as I know that it's gone. So that's something that we will proceed with, I hope, to talk about, expansion of, during season at least, in that.
Logistically, how would that work out?
I think,
I mean, as far as payment, as far as, I mean, just generally, I don't.
how it would work out with our provider, or, he thought that there might be some flexibility, say with Harbor House, or to put another unit into service during season. We have 2 right now that are full-time.
Right.
But perhaps there could be a flexible unit in one of their properties that we might be able to use when we have more boats in the
And
marina.
Kathy, would that change our fees to?
I don't think that that was in thought
Okay.
about
Great.
that. It's strictly kind of
Yeah.
just an idea out there, and there really hasn't been, I don't think that that would be in the plan.
Okay. Bruce, any questions for Kathy?
Well, I just heard, I seem to recall that one of the issues with the units that he provides is that they're limited in hours.
Yes.
So is there an opportunity to discuss expanding the hours, put combination locks or electric locks?
That is something that we have had in mind, like a key card kind of situation or whatever. Right now, they're in use when the office for Matanzas Inn is going. It's like 8 to 9 or something like that. And there has been some discussion. We haven't gotten very far with that.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Ray, any questions for Kathy?
No questions, just thank you, Kathy, for your work and your concise report.
Thank you.
Roxanne, questions for Kathy?
I have none, being their liaison.
You're up to date.
I'm up to date.
Okay, Kathy, anything else you need from us?
I don't think so at this time.
Thanks for your work.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Mr. Veach, Marine Resource Task Force. I loved all the lizard talk.
So Bill Veach for the record, Marine Resources Task Force. Yeah, you asked us some time ago to look into lizards, and we took it a little over the top. We were, figuring out, practicing how we actually trap lizards and whatnot. So
Did you enjoy that, Bill?
a little too much, but not as much as my wife.
Yeah, right.
There was one day I heard her, screaming, and she was out having breakfast and watching a lizard going into the trap, getting closer and closer to the trip. And then when it trapped, she was like Wisconsin won the Rose Bowl. So I'm sure you probably read the report. The way I look at it, there's probably 4 options. I'll give you the way I see it for choices for the council on this, starting with probably the most burdensome for the town, and that would probably be to have the town staff, learn how to trap or snare iguanas. The second would be the way that Sanibel has done it, or the county has done it for Captiva, and that would be to hire somebody. So if a resident has an iguana, they can call the town and you'll send somebody out. The third would just be to advise people, how to cook up iguana tails and things like that. And the fourth is just to do nothing at all and pretend I was never here.
Denied on the last option. Okay. Bill, questions for Bill? Roxanne?
I'm also the liaison to MRF, so I think I'm up to date with them.
Okay. And did you have a preference on the options?
I guess I would like to hear what Roger has to say as to his preferences. He might have some ideas on it. So I was going to bring this up at the council member items to
Okay.
see if he wanted to put it on an agenda or how he wanted to handle it.
Okay. Other questions for Bill? Joanne? Anything?
No, I just, when I look at it, I think it probably a combination of actions where town does its own properties and has perhaps a list of contractors and information for residents who want to, and then keep the community informed on. And MRF can help us when the certain kinds, like for instance, if we wind up getting a monitor on the island, people need to know they're here, some things like that. So probably I would favor that kind of a combination, public-private, rather than the town private property.
Ray?
I was just clearing my throat. I wasn't trying to get the mic.
Okay.
But I will. I have a comment. Just a comment. For those that might not think this is a serious problem, it's very serious, the lizards, the iguanas in particular. I do a lot of walking with my dog, Boudreaux, and we end up walking along a lot of seawalls. And I'm constantly finding new dens where these things are burrowing behind seawalls. And I'm constantly seeing neighbors filling in these holes, thinking that it's just typical erosion or water getting back in there. And I tell them that that's not the case. Those are iguanas that are in there digging behind those seawalls. So it's a real problem. And I'm sure, Bill, you know a lot more about these critters now than I'll ever know. But thanks for your research on it. And I agree with Joanne. It's got to be some sort of combination of town involvement and private, and have to get a handle on these things. Thank you.
Bruce, any comments?
Well, I got some, but people probably won't want to hear them. But I noticed that you were talking about the problems with them. One of the other problems with the iguanas is that they destroy landscaping. They love hibiscus, and that's irritating to see them destroy hibiscus and other plants. Over at Waterside, on the where the mangroves are, there's a couple of them over there that's like that big. One of them's orange. And if everyone had a trapper, that'd be the place to start. That sucker's huge. What else was I going to say? Well, oh, do you know if there's an area on the island that seems to have more than others? Have you done any sort of survey at all?
I've done a survey. A lot of the response I got were from off the island. Apparently, San Carlos Island has a lot of them too. It seems like iguanas are pretty widespread. They like water, so they tend to be everything around the canals, which is also, like I say, a problem because then can undermine those seawalls. The other lizards, the smaller ones, seem to be pretty patchy. I think there's a couple areas you have a lot of agamas, and then some areas where there aren't any. So they're spreading. And I do think no matter what you do, I don't think we can get rid of the iguanas. It's really about controlling the numbers.
It's funny because different areas of the island really have different environmental things going on. Living on the beachfront, we've always just had the anoles, and now the curly tails have come in, and they've killed off, so you watch these levels now. I have not at my house seen the agamas or any of the larger than the curly tails so far, but Bill's just up at Connecticut on the beachfront, and they have agamas already. So it's it's a building problem, probably even on the beachfront, as well as the Back Bay canals. So, you can watch it growing, and we need to do something about
Bill, I guess I would take, I'd like to see us take an aggressive approach on this. I, for one, if I lived on a canal and had a giant iguana like Bruce is talking about, I would not be the type of person who's going to trap that iguana. I'd be calling somebody.
Right.
And I think there's probably a large population of people like me in the town that are not going to trap the lizards. So there has to be some, in order to wrap our hands around it, I think we need to have some aggressive plan. And maybe there ends up being a group of people in the town who become the lizard hunters. I don't know, but I really think we need to wrap our heads around it, because they are spreading, they are growing, and lots of people with small dogs or even bigger pets, these iguanas are intense. And then I don't know about the small lizards, whether or not they pose any threat other than killing off our native species. I have no idea, but I think it's something we need to be aggressive about.
Murph, do you have any list of private contractors that do this kind of thing?
No, we haven't taken it that far. We could. I could just call up, Sanibel, see who they use, or the county.
It's probably something we need as well.
But even if you call a private contractor, if that iguana's laying out on your dock and you call the private contractor, by the time the contractor gets here, the iguana's long gone. Is it? Oh, they set a trap.
Well, they can set a trap, or they also snare them. I've seen, YouTube videos of guys with a fishing pole with a snare on it, and they're just popping them off into a big cage.
And then what do they do with them?
The one that I saw he was on the other coast. He uses it. They actually harvest them. They use the skin for making things, and they eat the tails. Like I said in the story, in Puerto Rico they call them bush chickens.
You make nice boots.
Okay, any other questions for Bill on the lizard scenario here? None? Anything you need from us, Bill? Rexanne's going to bring it forward under council members' items and reports.
Okay, yeah, because we don't want to be too presumptuous with the town, because we know that the staff have a lot to do and they necessarily need more things to do. And then one final note: our vice chair Shannon Mapes is leaving. She's moving out of state, and just publicly, I really want to thank her. She's been great on the committee. She's very passionate. She really works hard. She's very knowledgeable. She'll do things like come and talk to council, even though she hates public speaking.
Yeah.
And she's really going to be missed. She's been a great asset to Murph and really was a driver for most of our agenda items.
Well, we'll miss her.
Concur. Thank you to
Yeah.
her for her service.
Absolutely.
Okay. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is an approval of the minutes of December 5th, 2019, and December 9th, 2019. Both meetings were held at 9 a.m. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve both sets of minutes with any changes as we are about to present.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. And any changes, Joanne?
I have none.
Anybody have any amendments to that or changes? All right, so there was a motion and a second, and all votes have been cast, and it passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is our first public hearing. This is the Grandview condominium appeal to additional units. This is to determine if the building permit for a 58-unit condominium with 2 guest suites may be approved. Mr. Herron, advertisements and all of that?
It's the one with the,
Sorry, hitting the wrong button. The appeal has been properly advertised, noticed. It is properly before you. It is a quasi-judicial item, so after or before, whichever is the council's choice, swearing of the witnesses, it would be appropriate to disclose any ex parte communications you may have had regarding this matter.
Would everybody stand who is going to give testimony in this case? Anybody who's going to speak about Grandview, would you please stand? Only one person in the room, okay?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Witnesses have
Thank
been
you.
sworn.
Mr. Butcher, any ex parte communications with regard to this case?
None?
Mr. Murphy?
None.
Ms. Hassafras?
None.
Mrs. Shamp?
None.
And I have
Just,
none.
sorry,
Sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
I spoke to Jason. Does that matter?
No, that's your staff.
Okay.
Joanne, nothing.
No.
And I have none as well. So we'll begin the public hearing with you, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Sarah
Good
Probst,
morning.
Community Development.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Oh, sorry. LBWBB LLC, owner of the proposed Grandview condominium on Bay Beach Boulevard, is seeking an appeal to a staff denial. The property is mixed residential on the future land use map and is zoned Bay Beach. The Bay Beach zoning regulations are primarily contained within the settlement agreement and the Lee County Code from the time of the settlement agreement. According to the settlement agreement, the parcel is permitted 58 residential units. The applicant has applied for a building permit for a condominium building with 58 residential units and 2 guest units. Staff is unable to approve the additional guest units because the code indicates that the guest units are considered density. The Lee County Code states that 2 persons or 2 beds shall equal 1 unit. The site contains adequate parking for the 2 guest units. Staff asks that council approve or deny the appeal request, and the applicant is also available.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
As you probably all know, this is the third of, I believe, building in that area of similar nature. It's my understanding the other buildings were allowed to have the guest units. Unfortunately, when the third building was about to come online, they approached the town for their building permit. We could not find any prior approval for these 2 guest units. So therefore, as staff, we had no alternative but to deny it. But those of you who've been on the island a long time and probably know the history of this may well know what was out there and contemplated out there, and can help bring some light to the situation. As Sarah mentioned, the applicant is here, and I'm sure they can tell you some history of the property and the site as well to perhaps refresh your memories or fill in some blanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Sarah at the moment? Thank you, Sarah. And do we have the applicant here to speak? Good morning.
Lisa Van Deen, I'm General Counsel for London Bay Homes, which is one of the development entities. It's the umbrella organization for LBWBB and LB Grandview, which will ultimately be the developer. I think that, as Sarah and Roger said, and thank you for allowing us to present this morning. We actually applied for a DO to Lee County back in May of 2017, and the building always was 58 units with the 2 guest suites. They are truly guest suites. There are no kitchens. They are not intended for permanent residential use. We have an approved set of condominium documents, which have not yet been recorded, but will be, that greatly restrict the use of these to only visitors of people who reside in the Grandview condominium. We have a maximum length of stay of 7 days with a little bit of language that I think it can be extended to 14 under certain circumstances. So they really truly are guest suites. When we submitted the DO application to Lee County, they were part of the building. Unfortunately, the DO approval letter says 58 units, and it talks about height and all these other things, and it doesn't mention the 2 guest suites. So as Sarah said, when we came in for a building permit, we're hoping to break ground this month, which is why we're here this morning. When we came in for the building permit, this issue came up, and I believe it's the last remaining issue. There are a couple little cleanup things, but this is the last remaining issue. The guest suites are a common element of the condominium, and again, I understand that the town and the council does not have any control or review the condominium documents, but to me that's an important element because they do not have a separate tax ID number. They are not separately taxed as a residential unit. Again, each unit owner will own 1/58 of these guest suites. So I think that that's an important factor to consider. As I said, they've got no kitchens, and they'll be subject to a recorded set of restrictions on their use. It's really all I have to say unless you have questions for me.
Thank you very much. Questions for the applicant? Bruce?
Nope.
Ray? Roxanne? Joanne? Okay, well, thank you very much. Interesting. Okay, council, or any public comment for this hearing? Anybody else wish to make comments? None of you gentlemen from Bay Beach? Okay, no one? Matt Noble, nothing? All right. Okay, we'll close the public comment, close the public hearing. So, council comments?
Move we accept the 2 guest units.
There's a motion to approve the additional 2 guest units. Is there a second to that motion?
I'm going to take a counter position. Well, I'll wait for a second.
Is there a second?
I'll
to the-
second it for discussion.
Okay, there's a second for discussion. Discussion on that motion?
I feel like the legal agreement, you know, when I look at, especially packet page 41 through 44, and then packet page 71 about the zoning, the stipulated agreement, it's pretty clear that it's 58 units, and I think the 2 additional guest units are indeed additional density beyond the legally binding agreement that was decided upon. I don't see a basis to allow the additional density personally, but.
Okay.
I think we're creating density without a basis for it on something that's already was additional density beyond the desires of the town and was come to, in a legal format, to come to this 58 units, but.
Bruce, you have comments?
Yeah, I think the guest units are an amenity. I don't think they're density. They may never be used. They might be used some of the time, a little bit. And I guess it really doesn't matter to me. They're not full housing units. They're just beds and I presume a bathroom in there. And it's an amenity to the condominium, as are the other buildings likewise having the same thing. And it sounds like it may have just been an oversight in the letter from Lee County that it wasn't recognized, but to me that doesn't really even matter. It's part of the project, and I believe it's okay.
You think it was an oversight rather than just, you don't think that if it was contemplated, it would have been stipulated in the original agreement?
I think Lee County just looked at the living units and recognized that. I mean, I don't have proof one way or the other, but the fact that the other buildings, I believe, have those amenities of those guest suites, that it's the standard that they've been approved in the past and would be approved again.
I have a question for John. Since I'm being told that our code says that they are density, wouldn't we need to do a variance if we wanted to grant this?
I think that the argument that's being made by the applicant, I don't necessarily am advocating for them, is that it is not, they are not units. They are, as Councilman Butcher is suggesting.
I understand that, but what, and I may have misunderstood Sarah, but I thought she said that our code indicates that guest units are considered density. So it sounds pretty black and white to me. Am I misinterpreting you, Sarah?
So in this instance, we have to go back to the Lee County Code because the settlement agreement references the Lee County Code, so it's from the 1986 Lee County Code, and it doesn't speak to hotel motel units. It speaks to all other uses that aren't covered by that section. And it says 2 persons or beds shall be the equivalent of 1 dwelling unit, and that's under the equivalency factor section of that code.
So it uses the term beds. So regardless of the fact they don't have kitchens. And Bruce, I'm not arguing against this. I just want to make sure if we do it correctly. It seems to me that it needs to be a variance.
Well, or the alternative would be, and I think that what staff is suggesting is that it be counted toward the 58 that is specified in the settlement agreement. So you would have 2 less full-sized or condo units, and the two would be
I
swapped out.
find it very hard to believe that's what they're trying to say.
Right,
No,
I
no,
agree.
I-
I agree.
There's no way. Will you, I'm sorry, I remember Lisa, but I don't, Vandy.
And
Thank you.
staff did not make any recommendation on how this should be handled, other
Yes,
than
of
this is an
course.
appeal.
Gotcha.
Well, and our position is as well as that actual, and I apologize, I didn't speak to this earlier.
We anxiously await our new microphones. So people. That's great.
Good, I'm getting my steps in this morning.
Okay.
There was an amendment to that settlement agreement, and it talks about, it's very confusing, I think, the way that this was done through these settlement agreements, and it is what it is today, but.
You should have been there. It was even worse.
So there was an amendment that talked about density and that, it said it's further the intent of the parties, a residential unit, let's see, sorry, I thought I had it highlighted. They subsequently amended, so the 58 units was in the original settlement agreement. There was a subsequent amendment that was recorded that basically said notwithstanding, the density should be considered a residential unit as that term is used and applying said regulations with the town's development regulations as they exist throughout the town on the date that the DO is applied for. So we've been going off the 2017, and I've gone through the code and haven't been able to find where there's this equivalency factor. The code from 2017 talks about hotel motel units. These are not that. I can't find where guest units are addressed. And again, as I've already said, these are accessory uses to a residential building. They are not intended to be residential dwelling units. They are not intended for permanent habitation. They will not have a separate tax ID. They are really intended for very short-term temporary use and only for people who are guests of people who own, or live within the Grandview condominium.
Lisa, then do you, as counsel for the applicant, feel comfortable not calling this a variance? Legally?
Yes, we went through this because it's, in my opinion is that this is an appeal of an interpretation of a code provision. It's not a variance.
That's what I wanted to clear up.
Yes, no, I don't think it's a variance. It's an appeal of a denial because of a code interpretation that we disagree with.
I have one other question. Are these units used for free or are they rented?
That is a good question. I think there's some charge to go with them to cover cleaning and maintenance costs and because they're a common element, but I don't think.
As if they're a rental
Larry's
unit.
nodding yes, that they are charged.
So it's a rental, they are rental units. And that's in our code.
But again, very restricted, and the charge is for the maintenance and the
They're
cleaning
not
and-
rental units to the public, Joanne.
Correct.
Other people outside cannot rent them. You have to live in a
Still two
condo.
additional units are rented. But I'm just looking for
I
code.
agree with you, Joanne.
Code bit, I mean, we're looking at the code. I'm
That
saying
that would be a
in the
use
code.
fee, not a rental necessarily, but.
Correct. I don't think it's a rental fee in the sense that the condominium owners or the condominium will have to pay sales and use tax to the Florida Department of Revenue because they're not that type of rental unit. Again, it is a use fee and it's intended to cover the costs of maintaining, cleaning, et cetera.
Lisa, okay, yeah, sure, go ahead.
I was involved in the original settlement agreement, and I don't recall this discussion coming up at that time about these other units. But be that as it may, you did mention that they were already in existence in the first two buildings in Grandview? Is that what you said?
I believe the other units within.
You believe?
Well, Grandview, we didn't develop them, and so the other buildings, I don't know that all of the other buildings within Waterside have guest units. I know the last one that was built did.
Right. I was just anxious to see how that worked out, and I'm sure it was fine. But
Sarah, I have a couple of questions for you. Thank you, Ms. Van Dien. So the stipulation that is part of our packet that was an agreement, ultimately an agreement between the town and Stardile and that whole organization back many years ago. That was for this particular condominium building, or do you understand that there were several developments included that now also have these guest units? How do you understand that?
Based on my reading of this, it appears to have been several properties that were included in this development agreement, settlement agreement.
And were those units, or were those buildings allowed to have these guest units as well?
I don't know. I was unable to find evidence of this within our records. But Fort Myers Beach, I don't believe, did all the reviews for those, so it would have been with Lee County, and I just was unable to find any complete records that indicated.
See, my recollection, may I? My recollection is that there were already some existing waterside buildings up, so we were taking it from here forward. What was left of waterside,
Right.
and then the properties out on Estero Boulevard and
Right.
so forth. The settlement agreement had to do with the remainder of the project. So what happened prior to that with waterside in those first few buildings, we didn't have anything to do with. That was Lee County.
I sure wish somebody could tell me that.
Oh, and reading the settlement agreement, it does say, it talks about parcels 15 and 16, parcels 8 and 14, parcel 10, so parcel 17, so it did break it up into multiple parcels that still needed to be developed.
No reference to guest suites.
The operative section of the settlement agreement that's at issue here is on page 38 of your packet, parcels 15 and 16, paragraph 6. Stardale may proceed with completion of the waterside project of the Bay Beach development with a total of 8 buildings on parcels 15 and 16, 3 of which are currently in existence and commonly referred to as Waterside 1, Waterside 2, Waterside 3. Each additional building shall be no more than 10 stories in height, and each shall have no more than 58 residential units.
I agree with Anita that it's kind of crucial to me to know whether the other units that were part of the settlement were allowed to have these. Is there some way we could take a recess and we could call management out there, or? John's saying sure.
It is, you know.
I mean, subsequent to the
Right.
settlement?
Right, that the others that were built subsequent to the settlement were allowed to have guest units. If they were, I'm tilting toward allowing them to do it. So I'd like to know that fact. And John was saying, sure, we could take a recess and he could attempt to find that out.
I can call a couple of people I know over there and ask them.
You got some in the room. So,
there you
Joanne, do you
go.
have any objection to a break?
None at all.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, before
Yes,
you
sir.
do that, if these gentlemen know from out there, can we just ask them if they know?
Sworn in?
You could,
Swear
that's
'em
why I
in?
was surprised they weren't saying. Are you all willing to testify in the case? So I'm going to reopen the public hearing, and we're going to swear in the gentlemen that wish to speak.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Okay. Who'd like to come first? Come on up. Appreciate you sharing with us what you know.
My name is Gary Kaufman. I reside in Waterside 4. I'm the president of the association there.
Good morning, Mr.
Okay.
Kaufman.
Good morning. Of the 7 existing buildings, 6 of them have overflow suites or guest suites. Okay, it's always been that way. From our understanding and whisper down the lane, the reason why one building does not have it is because they wanted a larger social room. And so that's why that one didn't have it.
Okay. So
And can he clarify, these are including buildings that were built after the settlement?
Well, he said 6 too, so there were 3 prior, and then the rest would be subsequent.
Thanks, Mr. Kaufman. Let's see what the next gentleman has to add. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Mark Wiseman. I'm the president of Manatee Bay, Waterside 7. Our building is the newest building in Waterside. It was built 10 years ago. We do not have guest suites. Mr. Murphy, as you were stating, maybe it's the timing. Since ours is the newest building, maybe we've only lived there for 6 years, so I'm not sure when it was first constructed why there were no suites in that building.
Do you know, Mr. Weissman, how many units are in your building?
58.
58.
With no guest suites. But our building is the only building out there that does not have guest suites.
Was
The newest building also.
was Chris Clausen the developer of that one?
I believe so.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Mr. Woods?
Larry Wood,
Morning, Mr. Wood.
President, Waterside 5, Dolphin Point. We have 2 guest suites, but we only have 54 units. The top 2 floors had one less to make penthouse size. So we have 54 and the 2 guest suites. And I believe, as the other mentioned there, the other ones, except for Waterside 7, have guest suites also. So, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I'll reclose the public hearing. That didn't help me.
No, that didn't help.
Didn't help at all, because to me, that says that the latest building, Mr. Weissman's building, has 58 residential units, which is what is stipulated in the agreement.
Right, but they have a larger common area.
But the common area doesn't matter. It's the fact that the guest units equate to units.
Oh, I know where Bruce, excuse me, I know where Bruce is coming with this. The developer made a decision somewhere along the line that when he was looking at amenities, that clubhouse or whatever he put in that building was more important to him from a sales point of view than those guest units.
Or the guest units weren't allowed. There's no record of that.
Well, I mean, how could they?
I can say that the building next to the one that doesn't have the guest units was built in 2004, and it has the guest units. So it's under the same agreement. Yes. So it was just a choice. It's an amenity choice.
And that, in my opinion, in my mind, that's what those are. Those are amenities. They're a sales tool that the developer uses to sell the units. Because someone buying a unit there says, if I have all this family, well, you get the picture. If I have all this family or friends there, and I don't want to put them all up at my place, we have these other quarters to house these people. And that's how they sell the units. It's an amenity.
Sarah, what do you think about these units being an amenity?
I don't know that I have an opinion on whether they're an amenity. I don't live in a condominium complex like this one.
You wouldn't call them an amenity, though, would you? From a code point of view, from a planning and zoning point of view, are they an amenity?
They are both.
You think they're both?
I think they're both.
I mean, it's certainly something that would be a nice thing for a condominium to have that option. If I had friends coming down and wanted to stay in the area and I didn't want them to have to stay in a hotel, I think that would be a nice amenity to have. I don't know that that's different than a hotel room, other than you're not renting it like a hotel room. So I can see both sides of it.
Wouldn't call it a residential unit, would you?
Well, I'm not calling it a residential unit. I'm calling it equivalency unit, which is what we have in our code. So that's really the only thing that I can compare it to, because it doesn't have a kitchen. It's not something that people are going to be living in for long term. I mean, they certainly have requirements in their condominium documents that don't allow long-term stays. So people aren't going to be living in these units. So I would look at them more as an equivalency factor, like a hotel unit.
Madam Mayor, members of council, clearly you can create some conditions beyond what are in the condominium documents to allay any concerns or better address the fact that that it's not a dwelling unit, to a traditional dwelling unit. Things, just re-verifying things such as it can't be to outsiders, it must be someone associated with who owns a unit in the building. as to amount of time and other things to perhaps make it clearer that it is an amenity and not a unit.
I have a question. How is this different? And I don't recall the name of the building. It just came forward in the last year where they were converting office space, which was an amenity in their condo, to additional units. They had to come forward. Was that a variance or a special exception? Do you remember which one that was? That was six additional
That was
units.
Gull Wing, and it was a rezoning.
So, I mean, to me,
Okay, is there any further discussion on this? It's going to be interesting to see what this vote is. I don't know where Rexanne is. I can't support the motion. You know what? I'm a little torn about it because I don't think it makes a difference. To the town, Bay Beach is its own entity. It's back there. Whether they've got 2 guest units or not, it's not going to complicate anybody's life. And so in that sense, the practical me wants to say, oh yeah, sure, have them. But I don't have any basis for it. So
and I concur. I wish there was a basis for it. I don't see it. I think it's well stipulated in this legal agreement what's allowed, and I feel like that is what is allowed.
So we have a motion by Mr. Butcher, if you will press your button, Bruce, and a second by Ray for discussion. I'm assuming you're leaving your second in
Yes.
place, Ray?
Yes.
And is there any further discussion on this? I'll call a roll call vote on this.
Second's not in yet.
Second's not in.
I put in before.
So, Bruce, your vote is?
Yes.
Ray, your
Aye.
vote is? Joanne? And Rexanne?
I'm going to vote to allow it.
And you're going to vote to allow it. So the motion passes 3-2. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Anyone want a break, or you want to keep going?
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is the text amendment. Hold on just a second. We'll let people kind of clear out. Have a nice day, folks.
Just while we're clearing out, my vote does not in any way reflect that I think that the staff made an error.
Oh, no, of course not. I could have easily done that. I
In
just.
fact, I agree with what you did.
Yep. Very good job, Sarah.
Yes, thank you for bringing it forward.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is a text amendment, LDC Section 34-3274, minimum use determination regulations. Sarah?
Good morning, Sarah Probst,
Good
Community
morning.
Development. This is one of the glitch list items that staff found. These minimum use determinations have caused problems with people who believe that they have legally buildable lots, and then they find out somewhere along the line that they do not. And that's because if you've built a house over a property line and it doesn't conform with the density or the square footage within the minimum use determination section of the code, then those are not buildable lots, despite the fact that they were platted and they're the same size lots as all the ones around that are buildable. So staff went about trying to resolve this. We've done a joint session and an LPA session where there was discussion about what needed to be included in this section, what was important. So essentially we ended up with you can build on a legally platted lot, no matter the size of that lot, as long as it has access to the right-of-way and utilities, and it's a buildable lot as far as it's not in like the recreation district or the environmentally critical district.
And the LPA concurred with the text changes?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just want to point out that this is for existing plats only, so if someone does a replat, that would not be applicable.
Yes, sir. Okay. Questions for Sarah on this? Joanne?
Sarah, do you have any idea about how many lots this might be on the island?
In doing sort of an initial look at this, it appeared to be over a dozen probably that this would apply to. And I'm sure that there are instances that we've missed, but that's mostly the ones that were below the 4,000 square foot limit and wouldn't have met the density requirements.
And then, do you feel that the language of this proposed change clearly represents that if the lot is in the allowable zoning and flume district? I mean,
Yes,
you think
we
that's
do.
clearly stated? Okay. And then my last thing was, and maybe, Mr. Herron, you may or may not have a response to this. You know, our LDC and comp plan and everything was obviously, at the time, we thought we were built out. So, you know, every time you feel like you may be doing something that has the potential to create more density, I think we need to be really careful. And my only point here would be, because of those concerns, that this change is only if you're going to build on it. That you can't now take that buildable lot, count it as a unit, and use it as a density transfer to
Oh, that's a
another
good point.
to another
That's a good
larger
point.
lot in another location. And I don't know how we control that, because now we've created 12 units that may go someplace else. These would be very small structures because
Yes.
these are small properties.
But they'd still be a unit.
But it would be a complete unit. So that would be my only concern in changing this, that doesn't wind up being 12 very large units someplace else and surprising
get what she's saying? Yeah.
surprising some neighborhood or some area that they now have a 12-unit condo beside them that would never have been allowed.
It would be possible for us to include additional language saying that these new units may not be
Transferable.
transferred for density
If
purposes.
that's legally allowable, and then I don't know if that's a.
Yes. If that is the desire of and the direction of the council, will make the change.
I concur with Joanne. I'd like to see that added.
Yes,
Okay.
as well.
So those are my only comments.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Joanne. Roxanne?
Question for John. If my memory serves me correctly, we were involved with litigation regarding minimum use determination on property behind Chapel by the Sea. I don't know that that's been concluded. And I'm pretty sure that this wouldn't, I hate to use the word muddy the waters, but it wouldn't have any, changing this now wouldn't have any adverse effect on our litigation?
No.
Okay.
And that's why I mentioned about the flume. And remember, if you remember that particular case, they do have 2.5 buildable lots or 1.5, the rest is wetland. It's not appropriate in the flume and zoning.
Right,
so.
right. And that litigation's still ongoing, right?
That is current.
Okay.
We're still waiting.
Okay.
for-
Ray, any questions?
No.
Bruce, anything?
John, are you familiar with, or Sarah, with other municipalities that have restrictions on lot sizes like this? I mean, I guess the issue here is because it was deemed appropriate before we incorporated is why we're doing this. Because today we do have restrictions on lot sizes after incorporation, right?
Yeah, smaller communities, older communities that have these otherwise considered to be substandard lots, it's not uncommon to have these type of regulations to provide for beneficial use or minimum use to provide administrative relief so you don't run into takings claims. This is very common.
Anything else from anyone?
Unless you had a comment, I was just going to move to set it for a second.
Open the public comment. Open the
Sorry.
public hearing. Thank you, Sarah. I'll open the public hearing. Would anybody care to comment on this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, before there's a motion,
Yes, sir.
I don't know if the council wants to, besides the non-transferability of them, make it clear that these lots, other than their size, meet all other criteria for being buildable.
Yes, sir.
So that's just a further clarification that you can't use this as a way to get around some other requirement.
Excellent. Okay.
I'll second your motion,
If you'd like to use your
Excuse me.
mechanism
She
here.
didn't
trying.
So
She
this
didn't
is,
make the
we're
motion, but you
moving,
didn't verbally make the motion, I don't think.
you're moving this to a second hearing.
Right, and I don't know, do I need to include the date certain in that motion, Michelle? John?
No, we'll schedule it
Okay.
unless you want a specific date. I think that we as staff need to get together to work
Yep.
on the language, so give us some flexibility.
Based on what I'm anticipating for the 21st, we might want to do it the first meeting in February.
Okay. So there is a motion and a second to move this to a second hearing, and hearing no further discussion, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda, under administrative agenda, is LO1-20-04, Public Works. This is an ADA transition plan. This is a motion to accept the recommendation of the Selection Advisory Committee and authorize the town manager to award a contract to Castellanos and Tramonte Architects for the completion of an ADA self-evaluation and transition plan in the amount of not to exceed $59,930. Roger?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is part of our effort to complete our local agency project approval for FDOT. You may recall we were approved for a specific project, LAP project, but in order to get the town eligible for all LAP projects, this is a requirement. Besides that element of it, I think, we should be doing everything we can to make sure our facilities and are fully accessible to handicapped persons, so that this would result in a report. Then that report may trigger some retrofits and other things that we may have to do. But I think if we're going to, do the talk, we should walk the walk and make our facilities handicap accessible. So we recommend your approval of this selection and contract, and it'll probably be a multi-year effort. I will say this, sometimes there are small things we can do to better accommodate people. It doesn't necessarily always result in physical improvements. In some cases it does. But there are other techniques and things that people who do this as a matter of their expertise can advise us to do some little things that will make the town services more accessible. So
Okay.
we hope you'll be supportive.
Thank you. Any questions for Roger on this? If not?
I'll move the item.
Okay, and once again, if,
And I'll second.
okay. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, go ahead.
I did have a comment. I can't tell you how much I am in favor of our town being as ADA responsive as we can be. And the added note to this is that at the recent TDC meeting, we had a speaker on ADA issues who was excellent. I think it would be a good idea. I can provide the information to Roger. I'd love to have him come to town, maybe do a walkthrough and offer suggestions as well, and maybe even have some kind of joint informal meeting with the Chamber of Commerce so that businesses could come and hear his suggestions. So I'd just like to offer that out there.
It was great. Thank you, Roxanne. Any other discussion? Joanne, waiting on your vote.
I was waiting for conversation, Dan.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Next item is a discussion on parking stackers for commercial properties, and whether or not they can be used to meet parking requirements. I have some very weird visuals on this, Sarah. Do you?
I'm going to apologize up front. This was Jason's case, and he's
Okay.
not well this morning. This has come before you as a discussion item so that we can get your input regarding how parking stackers should be addressed. There's nothing in our current LDC about these. We wanted to get your opinion on what was important to you in regards to determining where, how many parking stackers could be located if buffers were required. So any input would be appreciated.
Can I just ask you a few questions on this? Because I really was trying to imagine where a parking stacker would be utilized other than, for example, within the confines of a parking garage or some other facility where you don't actually see the parking stackers. Because I was trying, thinking about them down Old San Carlos or wherever. So where could you even imagine that a parking stacker could be used?
They can be located in parking lot. I've seen them a lot in larger cities. I mean, I haven't seen them in the local area. A lot of times they're up against buildings and smaller parking lots where there aren't enough parking spaces, so they create more, especially for long-term uses. If somebody's going to be there for a little bit longer, it makes sense to create additional spaces with those stackers. I haven't seen them a lot in Southwest Florida. But I have seen them in cities, mostly adjacent to buildings.
Okay. Comments? Go ahead, Ray.
I was thinking about that very question, where you would envision these things. And the only thing that I could think of was lots like Norm's lot, out of the way, it's a existing parking. But anywhere else you put them on the island, you're affecting views constantly, no matter where you stick them, so I think it's a slippery slope. Getting involved in these sort of things, but I think the question is how to regulate them, that's my 2
Comments,
cents.
Bruce?
I would not be in favor of having them in open parking lots. If they're confined inside a building area, that's fine, but open parking lots, no.
I'm thinking I would agree with Bruce. They just are unpleasant looking, and I agree that I was having trouble picturing them anywhere on the island, except maybe near a marina, where they already have stacked boats.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, inside the barn.
Yeah. Joanne?
I agree. I thought a lot about this, and I agree, that aesthetically, they're very unpleasant. I think that they are, and we don't even know the impact yet. We're going to find out because they have been proposed inside at the TPI development, and we really don't know the impact. But once again, to me, it's adding density. And I look back, and I was actually looking at the comp plan because of the Walker. Adding parking density, and it does add density because currently, if you have a parking lot, you have design standards, and you get a certain number of parking spaces per lot. I mean, that's the density of that lot per our code. So to add stackers does double the density allowed on that lot currently by our code. So that's how I see that it's controlled. But I thought it was interesting, and it does relate to the Walker study later, that there were interesting comments in the comp plan with regard to the fact that, first of all, we have an infrastructure problem. As much as we have a parking problem, we really have a road capacity problem. So, doubling the parking and whatever anywhere doesn't change the capacity of the bridge or the capacity of the minimal road we have. And when you look at the comp plan and the solutions they have, they don't ask for more parking spaces, although they did recommend some garage locations, and these could be used in a garage location. But what they talk about are actually things that relate to seasonal. We don't really have a parking problem off-season. We have a parking problem for 3.5 months probably. And how do you change that? And when we get into the Walker discussion, we can get into it more. But they talked about, like giving free trolley passes to residents rather than free parking passes. They talk about giving reduced rates if you arrive at 7:30 in the morning or 8 in the morning instead of coming at 10 or 9, 10 or 11 in the morning when traffic backs up. They talk about increasing parking rates in season. So it costs a lot to bring your car here in season. It makes you think twice about using Lee-Tran as compared to coming here. But off-season, when we don't have a parking problem, we want to bring cars here, then you have lower parking rates. I see all of those recommendations from the comp plan as better ideas than this, which I think doesn't solve the traffic problem, which is what we really want. It brings more cars instead of working on the multimodal and free public transport that we want. And aesthetically, they're just terrible. So that's my complete answer on why no. I would not do it except in a parking garage.
I agree. Wouldn't do
So-
it except within a parking garage and
So-
within a confined space.
Yeah, I wouldn't say
there's-
just a parking
A
garage.
confined space.
Yeah.
Indoor space, I would say, yeah.
So there's no interest in putting this as a use in the use table that could come forward with a special exception, which means you would be able to make some determinations and say, you can do it here if X, Y, and Z, where you can put conditions on it.
I just can't think of an example of what that would be. I'm thinking of Santini Plaza because, of course, you know, they've got all that back area and whatever. If that property were to redevelop, I just don't know.
But then there's still condos we'd
Yeah,
be staring
yeah,
at them.
yeah.
I mean, it
The-
seems
The
like
applicant
anywhere.
is here if you guys would like to, he has.
You're here on
an
parking stackers? Good Lord, Matt. Okay, let's hear what you have to say.
For the record, Matt Noble, I'm sorry, I'm kind of suffering through a cold.
That's okay, it's nice to see you, Matt.
Thank you. This is a specific solution for a specific site. If you know where the jewelry store is on Old San Carlos, that building
The corner of
is,
Third?
yes,
Uh-huh,
that building is very dilapidated.
uh-huh.
It will be torn down. It includes 2 dwelling units, as well as Bill's T-shirt shop for SOB and the jewelry store
In a parking lot.
in a parking lot behind it. It would be converted to a residential building on the front parcel. I think everybody would be happy with it. The preeminent Florida vernacular architect in Florida is actually designing the building. It would include 7 car stackers on the parking aisle that faces the Snug Harbor parking lot. It would be fully shielded with a living green wall on one side of it. These are very minor structures. They look like crosses. They only get to a height of about 11 to 13 feet maximum. There would be buffers all the way around the site installed. There would be an 8-foot wall and buffer to the back towards 3rd Street. Along 3rd Street, there would be the right-of-way buffer. Sure.
By using the stackers in building the residential building, does it therefore allow more units and more square footage than could possibly fit otherwise because you don't have the space for the parking?
It does, but here's the other thing that the applicant is thinking. The applicant is proposing to create 5 parking spaces on 3rd Street because there's no on-street parking there. So really, we're talking about, when it comes down to it, 2 parking spaces, the deficiency of 2 parking spaces.
See, this is, thank you, sorry.
Yep.
Does anybody else have a question for Matt?
Go ahead.
But this is my concern.
Yeah,
To begin to use parking stackers so that people can have businesses or residences larger than what our density, our code would permit is another, I got a proverbial, I would say we are 7 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag already. And are we going to do these kinds of? I'm being nice.
You are.
I'm being really nice. And are we going to make it where now we're trying to cram 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag? You know, in other words, you're only allowed a certain density because of the parking requirement. So now by making it where you stack the cars, you make the building larger, you're increasing densities and you've taken the cars up and I can't promote it. I mean, we're built out. I can't promote the change in density that way.
I'm just thinking about a property where that, you know, these houses here at the 5,000 block, what's it called? Turtle Club, Turtle Bay, Turtle something, the Turtle Houses. And they've created kind of an alcove. You drive in, you know, I could see even a property like that having something like this, maybe.
They're 2-story high inside, like,
Yeah,
I know
they
one
are.
of the residents has that in his garage, because those houses are elevated, and you can You can stack them inside your own garage in your home. People do that. I mean, people have lifts, they work on their cars too. But once again, that's a contained thing. It wouldn't be out in the open, and it wasn't used to increase your density on the lot. Because next thing you know, then everybody's gonna come in for twice the commercial density and stack their cars. You all remember the issue with I guess it's the surf club now, you know, how it switched across the way, and they were trying to figure out how to develop that, and Valley Park, and I mean, they were trying to cram 10 pounds of potatoes. 10 pounds of potato in a 5-pound bag. If we were in a barrier island built out with traffic, as we all know, backed up onto Summerlin and down almost the length of the island, I'd say, yeah, let's create more density. We can't. We don't have the road capacity to create more density, and that's what this is for, creating more density. I can't support it.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, one other consideration, you know, if you're inclined to allow these, whether they're inside a building or not, is that by using mechanical devices to meet the minimum parking requirements, if that device goes down, then they're not at minimum, they're not meeting the minimum parking requirements. So if people are going to consider these as a solution, you may want to say, well, you know, you address all our other concerns with regard to stackers. However, instead of having 6, we may want you to have 7, just because at times one of them may be down for mechanical or maintenance purposes. So we want to make sure that you're meeting the minimum parking requirement.
Roxanne, comment?
I was just going to say, if people are already using them inside their garages, it sounds like that's outside of the code. So someone could build a marina building or something and already put them in there.
Well, I'm
So-
just thinking in the.
We don't regulate what goes on inside the building with equipment. So what we're saying that is okay with us to do is already allowed. So it sounds, in a sense, so it sounds to me like we want to say we don't need to address it in a way, except that we don't allow them outside of buildings, I guess would be.
Well, the only other time we've really allowed it, I mean, officially allowed it, was through a formal CPD, which was the TPI CPD, and it was them bringing it forward as part of their parking requirement, and it was contained, and it was, and as part of the CPD specifically. So in a way, I guess that's the process whereby that occurs, but.
But you know what, in the scenario that Matt just described, instead of having buffered sides, instead of it being open, I mean, that property could create a box, which is not attractive, and accomplish the same thing by having the stackers inside the box.
Well, not really, because the other homes that have been built that have had them inside met the correct density for their lot. This is a way of getting increased density for a lot by stacking the cars. Now, if they want to, because they're building to FEMA flood zone, and they're building the correct density for that zoning and not asking for any additional whatever, and they happen to add a stacker because they got 4 cars instead of 2, it doesn't matter that they've got 4 cars hidden in their garage and they stacked them this way instead of stacking them that way. They still only had the correct number of units, and it didn't change the calculation of that. And that's the difference to me.
If I could, because I've played with this for months, and we had several discussions with staff that led us here today. The building itself is pretty much going at grade level, so there is no room underneath it. It will be dried flood proofed. It's in the AE zone. The stackers themselves can meet flood requirements either through disconnects up above or down below. They are electronic motors, so they're very quiet. Also, keep in mind to address the issue if one breaks down, that was part of the reason why the applicant was providing 5 on-street parking that could be metered for the town as well.
Matt, if
There's
part-
25 required parking spaces. The development would result in 30 spaces with the stackers.
What kind of density are you talking about building there? What sort of building is it? I mean, is it,
It's a restaurant building, so it's not density, it's intensity of
Yeah,
use.
okay.
It's about a 6,000 square foot
well,
building.
yeah, every
It's
time
not
I
a
hear
very
density,
large
I'm
building.
talking about residential. Every time I hear density, I think residential. But when I hear,
So are we
so
going to
we're
have
talking
all
about
our,
intensity.
we're talking
It's a
about all our
commercial.
commercial buildings starting to stack cars to get,
I think we have to, okay, so I think it's pretty clear that nobody wants to see these stackers. So if we leave it at we don't want to see them, then that leaves some options for people maybe, but we don't want to see them. Is that
but we,
pretty much the
but we
good-
also don't want them to be used as a way of getting more density or intensity than what a lot allows. I mean, that's the other part of it. You know, we have to, how do we control density on this island? I mean, that's what the LDC and the comp plan are for. I mean, don't you feel like, you know, you buy a lot and you know the size that's allowed? Now we're trying to manufacture ways of creating more density and intensity and working around our code, cheating our code. I think that is a very slippery slope. That means on every single lot on this island, you could be having double the size or increasing the size of everything. I don't think that's a wise policy.
Well, not every single lot,
But-
we're
but a lot.
We're talking specifically commercial here, not.
No, we're not. It
Well-
could be residential too.
But this
says
topic is commercial.
Okay.
And my other question is, you know, we're down in in that special zoning district, you know, how does that play in with,
It has an impact, but I think we have to, that particular development, I think we have to look at that development, you're not asking us to look at that, you're asking us to just talk about stackers.
well, that's a,
Yes, I mean, we did come forward with this as a discussion item to see how you felt about stackers, how that should be addressed in our code, if it should be addressed in our code, because currently it's not at all. And when Jason and I discussed this, we saw it as something that could require a special exception potentially, and that way it would come forward and you could evaluate it on the criteria of each site that's proposing it and the
It would have
the
to be
needs.
that, for sure. For sure, there's something. But, I mean, I understand exactly what Joanne's saying, and I think that it could be a slippery slope, because though we talk about the island built out, and I thought about this after you and I talked the other day, you know, back in 1995, all we heard all the time was, gosh, you're 20 years too late for incorporating. You should have incorporated when Sanibel incorporated, blah, blah, blah. But the challenge of Fort Myers Beach isn't development, it's redevelopment. It's taking parcels and redoing it. And that's been our challenge from day one. Built out or not built out, it's what's it going to change into? What do we morph into? And, you know, that site that Matt just referred to is an interesting, will be an interesting issue.
And I agree, but that whole concept of redevelopment, but when I think of redevelopment, I don't think of it as the image of this island that everybody loves, the funky image as being car stackers and.
No, I agree.
And
I
things
agree.
going twice as big. I mean, we're trying to change the residential design standards to get things smaller, and now we're going to do things to allow commercial to go twice as much or to,
I think you can pretty much see that it's not an idea that anybody particularly likes, unless it's encapsulated some way that nobody has to look at it.
But is the question, do they need to present something to us so that it is addressed in the code? Is that better than leaving it out entirely?
I think so.
Yeah. So I think they do need to do something with this.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we were trying to accomplish. One is that, you know, we have someone who's spending money with design and other professionals to redevelop their property, and we didn't want them to get all the way down the path to find out that the door would be shut in their face. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do that. The other thing is, of course, on small islands, there's a lot of monkey see, monkey do stuff. So if someone sees someone doing something, they think automatically they could do it as well. So we want to be careful about that. So we wanted to help, perhaps the media through reporting on today's meeting to help people understand what, if anything, the council has concluded about these things. What my takeaway is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the council's willing to look at these on a case-by-case basis. However, the general consensus I'm hearing today is that you're not inclined to accept open-air scenarios, except in the most rare and unique situations.
I'd take out rare and unique. I would just say period.
Period?
Yeah,
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know about open, yeah.
Okay, so, so enclosed and by special exception.
You know, this, I'm going to hearken to, anybody who drives down through Bonita will know that at Coconut Jacks and at Docks, the lanes are actually closed. It's backed up all the way up Hickory Boulevard because you can't get through that area anymore. And you know why? Because they've got valet parking and they can't get the cars in fast enough. It's the same thing we did with TPI. There's stackers in there, but if you recall, and there was some fight about this, there's included in there a huge fine if you block Crescent. When you add stackers into a restaurant, where does all that traffic wait? Think about drive by Coconut Jacks and tell me, you take a tiny narrow street like Old San Carlos Boulevard and the side street, that goes off of, that we're talking about. Third. And now you have cars waiting to get into these stackers and whatever. This is not traffic management. You're creating parking greater than the street system can sustain and the traffic flow can sustain. Yep. This is a very dangerous precedent.
Oh, do you have your direction, Sarah?
I believe so. We will work on some language to amend the code to put them in the use section of the code as a special exception.
Enclosed.
Enclosed.
Which means that everybody can come forward as a special exception. Anybody can bring forward a special exception.
Yes, they would have the right to bring it forward. You would not be obligated in any way to approve it.
Because I'd hate to eliminate something totally out of hand, and because there will be cases that come along eventually that will be worth a second look. Now, that particular case is terrible. We agree on that. But somewhere down the line, there might be another case that comes forward that's worthy of consideration, and I would hate to just eliminate all of that.
I know that traffic studies can be skewed, but I would say a traffic flow study for the specific development would be part of that too. You come forward with a special exception, but part of that would have to be traffic flow, because now you're talking about a whole different, something that impacts the ability for people to get up and down those streets when cars back up, because you have to be stacking the cars. You can't flow in.
My recollection when we created that old San Carlos district, it was as an incentive to encourage the redevelopment of that blighted area, which we did. And I would hate to tell people now at this late date that they can't, they can't keep bringing ideas forward to redevelop it, because it's actually turned out fairly well. It took a long time, but it's really turning out well. And I'd hate to discourage people from bringing forward other ideas in the future. So, but in this particular case, I am in agreement with you all.
So for clarification, so a special exception only enclosed or special exception?
Only enclosed.
Only enclosed, okay.
Okay,
thank you.
all right. Did you disagree, Ray?
I do disagree with that, but I'm just one person. But I disagree.
Anybody?
I disagree with eliminating it completely out of hand.
Yeah.
Just because there may be one day something that does fit and works, that's worthy of looking at. I mean, just because I agree. I mean, the thought of them in a lot of areas on this island is not very appealing to me, even if they're only going up 12 or 13 feet, whatever it is. But there will come one day where there will be one where it's worthy of consideration. And I don't want to eliminate everything out of hand.
Okay, well, does the majority of the council right now agree that the special exception should include only enclosed space?
Only enclosed.
Yes.
Bruce?
And
Okay.
a traffic study?
I'm not a believer in those, especially on Fort Myers Beach, but we could entertain that as well. Matt, we're going to close this section here now, but will you call me because I have an idea for you? Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break. Or 10.
Chimes.
I don't know. What are the chimes sounding?
It's the break chime.
The break chime.
It's the break chime. It's 10:38, and we reconvene. The next item on the agenda is the parking study questions. This is with Walker Consultants. Yes, Roger.
Thank you. So, as you recall, Walker gave a report and a presentation, and we have two items that we clearly understand and are working on, and those are the idea of finding out a way to incorporate the available parking, both public and private, into our app, and looking at perhaps the benefit of uniform signage. So we understand those two things, and we're currently working on those. But there's a whole series of sort of high-level questions that we're not really clear about how the council would like us to proceed. So one of them you kind of put your toe in the water this morning on already, and that is by using mechanical equipment, should we sort of encourage more parking than perhaps would otherwise fit on a piece of land, and under what circumstances that might be appropriate? So I'm going to generally classify that into a category I'm going to call manufacturing additional parking out of thin air, if you will.
That's a good category, Roger.
You know, where, you know, through by innovative approaches, and does the council want to do that? And of course, the flip side of that issue is a concern that Councilor Champ mentioned with regard to, you know, how much more vehicles can we accommodate? Then the other part of this is with respect to do we just basically say that our current parking is what our current parking, both existing and future, is what it is, and beyond that, people who, you know, we're almost, I don't want to say we want to de-incentivize people to come here by car, but we're not going to try to manufacture more parking. We're just going to perhaps try to make it more accessible. You know, we're not going to, at this point, embark on a public parking garage or things of that nature. So those are sort of the high-level types of things, and then you get into the specific items mentioned by Walker. And normally, we would have put this on an M&P, but from what we understand, there may be a problem with Thursday's M&P in terms of counselor attendance. And so we wanted to give you and since the agenda was otherwise not that busy, to give you an opportunity to give us some input here today. But clearly, if you prefer, we can move it to an M&P. If you prefer to give it some more thought and deal with it then.
Okay. Council, questions or comments on this? Any interest in moving it to the M&P? The issue with M&P is that the TDC meeting falls on the same.
You know what? It's 10:45, and I think we should just get this done. Why put it off?
Absolutely.
Now, I have a lot to say. I apologize, but we can't keep putting stuff off, I think. So I would just prefer do it.
If you've got a lot to say, why don't you start?
Okay, I sort of started on it already, and I do really have concerns in the concept of creating more parking. I think we really have to be honest with ourselves that we could create 3 times the parking and have what, cars pulled up? Where are they going to back up to? Back to Daniels? I mean, I could not get out from my home. I couldn't go south, and I couldn't go north. And I love living here. I'm not going to leave. I'm not complaining. But it's my job to recognize these things and say, there are times that there is not enough parking, no matter what you do, that will change the road. And to increase the number of parking spots that we have just encourages more cars. And we can't encourage that. We need water taxis maybe. We need a parking deck at the Lee-Tran area because people start using that so much. We need a trolley lane, shall we come? But to keep creating more and more parking spots does not solve our problem. And I really did enjoy looking at the traffic portion of the comp plan, because it did talk, and it was all in section 7, if you want to look at it. It was like page 7A, 19 through like 24, 32 it was. And if you want to take a look at it at some point, maybe you did. But they say that more parking spaces induces more people to drive here. I don't think that's what we want to do. Lee County, this is all in there, planned a variable message sign for their spaces at Bowditch. So we should be working with Lee County, because their intent when they put in all those spaces at Bowditch was to put a variable sign, which to me means Lee County, FDOT, and us should be in on this. I don't want to do things that take longer, but the town can't bear all the expense too. And the county has a lot of parking spots on this island. I love the idea of the variable parking rates. Increasing the rates during high season will encourage people to use Lee-Tran. There's not enough spots here in season and road capacity for enough spots. So in season, and the nice thing about the variable signage is you go to expensive spots in season. Off season, you can go to free or very low parking rates because you want to encourage people to come.
Could I interrupt you so that we don't shift topics?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you advocating to increase the cost during season on private parking lots, that we would regulate what a private business could charge?
No, private lots do that already. It would be on town lots,
Okay,
too.
I just wanted to clarify.
But the fact that we state that that's a strategy will make private lots do what they like. But I know for a fact, I talked to somebody who owns a bunch of lots, and they said last week during, when it was so crowded here, $20 a day. This week, $5 a day. And that's in a private lot. So private lots are already doing that. The town doesn't. You've talked about this a lot, about the $3 an hour, whatever. Well, in season, maybe it could be $5 an hour. Off season, $1, or free at the beach accesses. Whatever we decide, it would equal out our income, but it would provide the policy direction or a functional stimulation. So I like the idea of the early bird special. If you arrive early and punch in, you're going to wind up paying less per hour. It encourages people to come early if they're here early. They talked about the variable message would disperse to all lots and equally load them. We know under the bridge at Matanzas, loads last. It wouldn't necessarily load last, and it may expedite with the variable message. So we do want to make sure that they load. And it does reiterate about the deficit in parking in just the 3 months only, and that you'll never meet that. So the other thing they talked about was parking garages, and to me it's almost the same as these stackers. What really works. But one thing I would ask Walker is, what are the current land costs per square feet that justify a garage versus surface parking? That was what was talked about in the comp plan. At that time, I think it was like $5, $15, I forget what the cost is, but probably land here is so expensive that building a parking garage may or may not even be a viable thing, and that's why people want to use stackers. See, they want to get twice without the investment of a parking garage. They want to put stackers in because our real estate is so valuable here. And what we really would rather encourage would be a parking garage in the long run. And if we let stackers come in, you're going to take away from that idea. The free trolley passes, and then marketing strategies to promote alternate modes of transportation. I don't think that the Lee-Tran transportation is marketed well. As a matter of fact, the sign comes so late, you're already in the other lane to go down San Carlos from the right lane. It doesn't even bring you down Pine Ridge. So marketing strategies. Now I'm going to get specifically to Walker's list of things. Sorry. Let me get to that. I think that what they're proposing is good. If we get to page, it was packet page, this is the old one from December of 2019. I'm going to refer back to that one. Back in December, they had some, let me get confused here, sorry, I want to see what's on today. No, it is their one from today. They talked about review and analyze existing single-purpose and joint-purpose parking lots, and the concept of surplus parking. In most towns, they talked about 15%. You can use 15% of your required parking as surplus parking. I like that. I think that that's it's just a fair number. It balances that concept of that you're supposed to provide the parking for your customers, as well as the opportunity for utilizing surplus parking. So that was a recommended number. And of course, in the signage, they should have conditions and hours of operation. The hours of operation would have to require the staff going back and actually looking at all these parking lots and what their predetermined conditions have been, and it's going to be a fair amount of work. The landscaping, I agree with the idea of reviewing the amount of buffering, and so that I would prefer to see more spaces by reducing buffering than by stacking, I guess
Yes, me
is the
too.
point I'm making. And that we should look at the buffering, what that would do. And it makes you also wonder, though, because we have other issues in the town, if you get this certain number more parking spots, if you're reducing your buffering and getting more spots, should you also provide one porta potty? Just a thought.
Reducing buffering.
If you take the option to reduce your buffering and get more parking spots, then you also provide a porta potty, or I hate to call it a porta potty, some whatever standard we set for what they would look like or be like.
I would say a TDC standard restroom that we have at the beach, that they provide space for that, and we get TDC to
Maybe only in season, because if it's something they have to rent or they move, or whatever, they would provide it only in high season and wouldn't have, I mean, whatever it is.
I'd leave it all the time.
All the time.
I had that on my list.
Okay, and then we are having a problem with the joint use lots, and I don't want to call out some properties, but there are some properties that have been using the joint use concept or shared parking lot and designating those spaces as being theirs, and then those are rented out spots. I think it's important that those be counted, that we be aware of what's going on, so that then those don't wind up being used in the 15% surplus. There's several spots in town that it's happening. I just don't want to call people out right now. I would say it's in the breakfast triangle. Let's put it that way. We have a lot of problems in that area with parking. So with regard to Chapter 34 and
Wait, can we just go back there to
Yeah.
the breakfast triangle for a second? What is the problem?
Well, one business has shared parking, a joint parking agreement.
Yep.
One business has no parking. And they're clearly using the business next door, and I don't know if there's even an agreement for that, but there's absolutely no parking, and they're on street all the time, so much that a third business that does have plenty of parking has to put a guard to protect their parking, because everybody for the other businesses are trying to take their parking. And I don't know how anybody hasn't been hit yet. I frequent that area. I don't like to cook breakfast. I go out for breakfast. My husband likes to go out for breakfast. And getting in and out of those areas is a nightmare, and season hasn't even started. So we need to really look at businesses and make sure that they are providing the parking that they're supposed to, and not let, if they've promised parking, that it's being used for that and not being used as excess surplus parking to make more profit. So that's why I like the 15%. I would not. Once again, we've got 7 pounds of potatoes and a 10-pound and a 5-pound bag already. I would not reduce parking requirements. I think we did that on Old San Carlos in our design standards, and I think that was appropriate there. I think that to do that through the rest of the community is going to be a problem. They're not as walkable areas. And then, let's see. The other ones are obvious: the Smart Town Strategic Solution, the real-time application. They talk about privately owned parking facilities, public parking availability. Once again, then I'd ask Walker or whatever, really, how feasible is, in reality, are we going to have a parking deck in today's cost environment? Is it unrealistic for us to expect a parking deck? because we talk about it all the time. What is the square foot, and is it not going to happen? And my other concern is, we're not really.
Can we stop there for a second?
Yeah.
Would you support something like that?
A public-private partnership?
No.
Or a private?
A parking deck.
Public? Or a private?
Private.
I would, in the right spot.
I think there's only one spot that they could be in.
Well,
Okay.
yeah. I think if somebody proposed that, it should be looked at. But I think it has to be looked at with eyes wide open,
Absolutely.
you know.
Yes.
Because, and then we have got to market, and maybe the parking people can help us with that. How do you market that you have variable rates and people are wise to use Letran, you know? How do we market that that's available? I think that that's really important. And then the last thing is, I am concerned about the consistency of our code enforcement. And I'll give another example where we've had buildings demolished and people seem to be just parking on those lots. And they don't meet code. They don't have a use permit for those. And, you know, there's safety issues there. They're unregulated, and they also hurt the individuals, and I'll use Norm or Dave's because they've come in before and said, you know, we comply with everything. We do our border. We're good citizens, and then you're letting other people not follow the code. That's not fair either. Either we have a code or we don't. We follow it or we don't. We enforce it or we don't.
Are you talking about
Equally.
people that are charging for parking or just wide open free
No,
parking?
just even wide open parking spaces on lots that do not have that use.
Well, the Tops property is a
Tops
perfect
is a-
example.
Tops, for instance.
was
And
full this
it was full, and it's uneven back there. Somebody's gonna fall, somebody's gonna get hurt. Is that our issue? I don't know. But is that fair to the people that we've required? You know, they have to charge because we've required them to buffer. We've required them to put in an ADA space. And some of them we're going after because they don't have the right use permit or they whatever, and then somebody else is just, there's a
Right,
free-for-all.
but they're charging, so I see a
Who
big
isn't?
difference. Huh?
There was nobody there.
No, I don't mean Tops is charging, I mean the other people
They
are
are charging, but how do you charge when somebody's got a piece of property that's not have a use permit on it, that's free, that just isn't fenced, it's an open lot? I don't think that's fair to the businesses that are, I'm just gonna use a simple example. Anita, I love your store there at Times Square, but you have a nice little space out front that you can't put your stuff out. I'm gonna get the same stuff that you sell inside, but I'm gonna go outside and either give it away for free, or I'm gonna charge almost nothing. Nobody's even gonna walk in your door. Is that fair to you? No, because you're paying your rent. You're doing
Oh, but I'd
whatever.
like to see you do it because
Show your
You'd
store.
say- You'd have that on video, but I'm just saying, it's not, it's
Yes,
unfair
I-
competition. It's not fair to the people who follow the code.
You're right, and
Not
if we could just stop for 1 second, since it's come up here on my list of topics, that property needs to be secured just like any other property that is either under construction or whatever. I mean, the fact that it's wide open is just, I'm referring to the Tops property, Roger, there's something needs to be done about that, but,
Okay, so I've been long and
ahead.
wordy, but I would not increase parking. I would use variable rates. I would find out at what price point will people use a trolley? How do you get people to use a trolley? What do other cities do in their variable rate? Lord knows, I go to
you know,
Manhattan.
back in the
it's
day,
done.
the trolley was free.
Yeah,
It ought to
And,
be free.
and the trolleys
and
were,
the trolley should be free,
and the trolley, but the town subsidized the trolley.
right?
And the trolley ridership increased dramatically. And then, Ray will remember this, a group of residents petitioned the council to put the charge back. These were people that didn't use the trolley, but they felt like the trolley was being used as a babysitting service. That because there was no fee attached to the trolley, kids would just get on and ride the trolley all day long. So
Think of that when my grandkids come to visit.
they just get on and just ride, you know? But there was
I
a
think
point in time
The
where the
tram
trolley
is
was
free
free.
though, right? The
Tram is free.
The tram is free, the trolley should be free too. However we work that with TDC, that needs to be free. But at any rate, I don't know if I've helped any, or if I've just blathered on, but, I've tried to address some of the things that were on their list and my general philosophy.
Could I just go back to a couple of your topics, one being variable pricing? Does anybody else have any comments on the concept of variable pricing? Roxanne?
I like it.
You do? Ray? Bruce, do you have any comment on variable pricing? You like it too? I don't know if I like it or not. No, that's not true. My instant reaction is I don't like it because I hear all the time people feel gouged, especially since our community is a place where people come back over and over and over again. They're like, oh, the restaurants raise their prices during season, the parking lots are doubled. I like the idea of the town
So are the
being
room
consistent.
rates.
Yeah,
So are the room
I
rates.
know,
So's everything.
But we're in the business of service. We're not in the business of making money. And I like the idea that we're consistent with our
But what better
prices.
service than to reduce the number of cars on the road? And to
I
get
don't know
more
that that's
bikes and
gonna-
get people moving around better.
Okay, well,
Because
there's
I don't
three-
use
there's
the
three of you that
businesses
like
in
it,
the
so-
north end at all. I like to go spend money. I can't use them this time of year. I can't get there.
Well, thank
See,
God
when
you
I,
can
when
get
I
there
say
other times.
variable rates, I think $3 is adequate. In off-season, I would drop it from 3.
So you
So
take
it-
it down for, okay, well, then my idea is that, then I can go with that. So you'd take it from 3 down to $1 or nothing or whatever, off-season. Is that what you all mean?
No. I would never make it nothing. But I would raise it higher than 3. It has to be enough where you go, ooh, gosh, it is gonna cost me $30 to park, or I could take the trolley for free or almost free. I'm gonna do that. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe the traffic people know, at what price point do people go, ooh, I think I will ride the trolley? Because now I got $30 to spend at an Eaton store or at Pete's Time Out or whatever. I can go to dinner for $30. So let's take the trolley and our dinner's paid for. Now we've got cars off the road.
And I think you need to have it higher than 3 to offset for our budget purposes the off-season.
I think it's a privilege to bring a car to a barrier island in season. It's a privilege. Welcome to it, but it's going to cost you something.
Anybody else have any comments on what about a residential trolley pass? Or residents, or just the idea of trolleys being subsidized by the town? Any comments on that?
I don't remember seeing that in here, so I
No,
hadn't thought about
I'm
it.
just talking about things that Joanne just kind of brought up.
Because they were in the comp plan, that's right.
Yeah, just to further the, what about reducing the buffering for an additional space if they?
I thought we already discussed that on the day they presented the plan, and we all said yes. I thought that question had been answered rather clearly.
Because the buffering requirement is ridiculous.
We answered that question.
All right, good. Okay, Roxanne, you want to go next?
Okay. First of all, I have a minor disagreement with Joanne. I don't believe that parking is the only cause of our traffic problem. She seems to imply that you know.
No, I said the road, the size of the road is more than the parking, sorry.
I see this as a balancing act. I don't think that discouraging all parking is the way to go, because getting people off the street is also a benefit. There are a lot of people driving down Estero Boulevard that can't find a place to park. So I think we have to balance encouragement and not just say we don't want to have any more parking because it encourages traffic. Is the LDC sufficient in addressing the da-da-da-da-da? I think, again, we already answered that question loudly and clearly when they presented the report to us, that no, we agreed that they had good suggestions about modifying the LDC, and we agreed that that should happen. Does the council want to create policies that encourage the creation of new parking? And that's a yes and a no.
It is a yes and a no.
It's a yes and a no. It's according to what they are. Or manufacture paid parking through existing development. Again, maybe in the right circumstances. Do the LDC regulations need to be modified to allow more standalone parking and/or use of existing parking lots for paid parking? I think that that is something that needs to be looked at. It's not working as it is. I'm not sure how to fix it, but it doesn't appear to be working. Should incentives be created for developers to construct additional surplus parking? Yes. Again, according to what they are. Is there a value in reconsidering seasonality periods for parking and how those temporary uses are created? Again, yes. And we already talked about stackers. We mentioned a parking garage. I think we should be open to the idea in the right location for one. And one other thing that I would mention that I've never heard, and it's tangentially related to parking, is I've had now two or three
Gosh, I
people
love that
mention.
word.
2 or 3 people mentioned to me now that it would be nice if there were lockers somewhere on the island, because they,
lockers?
to put their beach chairs or whatever, they could pay like at an airport. They park somewhere, but they end up having to move to go to a restaurant or something because they have to schlep back to their car to put away their stuff. And it's, like I said, it's interrelated in a way, and it seems like it would be nice, and maybe it needs to be at the county park rather than on town property. But
Lockers there one day.
yes, I believe they used to have them and they're gone. So that would be something I would think would be helpful. And I think it does relate to the parking issue. You're less likely to move your car if you can go and stick your stuff somewhere.
We need more organized bike parking too, at Times Square, different areas where quick, easy, lock up your bikes.
Okay. Ray, any additional comments?
No, I think between Joanne and Rexanne, most of the universe was covered. But
I warned you.
I'm not sure if that was a left-handed
No,
comment.
no, it was a compliment. Just take it the way it was. It was
Of
a
your
compliment.
thoroughness.
Thoroughness and so forth and so on. You know, this business about the parking garage, I mean, we've been talking about this for 25 years, and
Before that,
yeah,
before that.
well, even before. But you know, they work off the beaches. They work off the beaches. I'll give you a perfect example. Collier County built one down on Vanderbilt Beach Road prior to where you get to the Ritz-Carlton. There's a parking garage there. And they have signs well before that that says parking garage full. So what do? You turn around and you go home. You don't get in that queue. You're out of luck. And so I'm a big proponent of things like that. I mean, they also have those same signs up on 111th Avenue, which is Mockley Road on the east side, 111th Avenue on the west side. Same signs going into Vanderbilt Beach, parking lots full, you know, too late. And I mean, if we had these lots, and some developers are already doing this, TPI is going to have apparently off-site parking, additional off-site parking up at their other development up on Pine Ridge to encourage keeping cars off. But this parking garage business is, you know, it has to be incentivized for a developer to build it, you know, and there lies the public-private partnership that's always been contemplated for a garage structure like that. But you know, it'll continue to be talked about. But I agree with you, Joanne. I mean, we got to keep the cars off the island. That's the answer to it. And we've rehashed this 1,000 times about how to do that. I mean, with every season that goes by like this, you know, with the Christmas week in particular, when we're so busy, you know, everything comes out again. You know, when are you going to build that third bridge? You know, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do? You know, it's the same stuff rehashed year after year after year after year. And but the road construction will certainly help. And again, we're limited on what we can do with the road. So there aren't a lot of things we can do, but there are a lot of little things that we can do. And until someone really steps forward and finds a way to make that financially feasible to build those structures, then we are what we are. And then the alternative is how to, as you say, incentivize people to keep their cars off the island. And that's the game. That's the game that we have to play here.
Just to jump in on Ray mentioning Naples, I've parked frequently down there, and I slammed them earlier about the mean traffic, but their parking garages are beautiful.
Yes, they are.
They are gorgeous, so it is possible to have a good-looking parking garage.
Yep.
Well, we've had good-looking ones proposed, where they landscape the outside and so forth, and
Murals, you name it.
well, they've built them down also on Fifth Avenue and 3rd Street South down in there. You wouldn't know that those parking garages are there the way they're tucked in there. So there are ways to do it. But again, I mean, that's bringing them onto the island to park in these garages, which we really don't want to do. Our preference would be to have them off the island, and there's got to be some entrepreneur over on San Carlos Island that really wants to do that.
Can you imagine with the what do you call it, gondolas or boats coming over and da-da-da? How fun.
Zip line.
There you go, zip line.
Bruce, do you have it, before this goes really awry, do you have any other comments, Bruce? About zip
Well,
lines and
I've got
gondolas?
comments that I was going to talk about in my council members' reports, had to do with traffic congestion. So I guess I'm just going to wait for that because parking, and that's
Okay.
different.
Okay.
So I have
Any-
nothing else to add.
Have we given them any guidance at all, Roger, when all is said and done?
Well, I think you have. I don't know that after we go through today's video with a consultant that there won't be additional questions generated, but I think we were definitely able to glean some things. I don't know that a clear policy has been decided, for example, about should the rates be increased or not increased in high season and to what, but clearly that's something that will generate some future conversation as it's not off the table.
I think the majority said raise them, we don't know to what, but we did say yes on that.
We also said to lower them,
Off-season.
right, so.
Okay,
raise,
so,
lower.
so that helps. Things like discounting the early bird or perhaps extending the hours of the meters for longer periods of time. If the council's inclined for us to look into those types of things, we could do that.
Sanibel did a whole big push, a couple of 2-3 years ago now, where they did a whole big PR push of come early, stay late. So come onto the island, as soon as you can, and don't think about leaving until late in the day, so you avoid all the traffic. And it was a very successful campaign. And but hopefully, when we have our PIO person on hand, this could be a real constant. If we advertise that, come to the beach for breakfast, your parking is $1 an hour. If you come at 10 o'clock to go to the beach, your parking's $5 an hour. And do something that says, so we kind of move people around a little bit more, and maybe that will help.
Right.
I think it's got some potential.
Okay, another thing sort of along the same lines is, do we make work with Lee County, try to make the trolley free, or do we say if you use the trolley coming in off island, that we'll give you a coupon for a discount somewhere in town and work with the chamber to do that so that someone gets business and, versus giving the money to the county per se, so you get your fare back.
I think that's great, but I don't think that's enough incentive for people to get on the trolley at Pine Ridge Road. I think if just that trolley was free, I think it would help enormously. If just the trolley from Pine Ridge to the beach.
And it were advertised earlier.
That's right. Take the free trolley to the beach.
Okay, so clearly that's something, if the council thinks that would be helpful, we could work on.
Well, we're going to be meeting with Commissioner Sandelli and others soon. We can talk to them about it.
Right.
I'm sure they'll love that idea.
So anyway, just to sort of summarize the conversation, I think it's been very helpful in the comments that we received. We'll go over them with the consultant. As I said, it may result in subsequent questions, but I think you gave us enough to work on for the immediate future.
Excellent. Anything else anyone wants to add? If not, we'll move on. We'll move on to, thank you very much for everybody's comments. We'll move on to the final public comment. Christy? Chelsea? Pat? It's a sad moment.
It is.
It's a very sad moment. God
Christy
rest
Corey,
his soul.
for the record. Sorry.
That's okay, honey. He was a great part of our team.
Yeah. I wish I was up here for better news. But on December 30th, we lost Randy. He was a member of our team at Beachwater for 8 years. He was at Town Hall for 5 years. We're
so
very
helpful.
close.
Yeah.
We're all very close.
Yeah.
He was the first one to work, first one to leave. He, the keeper of the water meters, as I called him, always kept the booster stations clean for us. We'll miss him tremendously. Nothing, Beachwater will never be the same. The town will never be the same. But we thoroughly loved him and enjoyed him while he was here. And we just wanted to let everyone know that his wife and his 2 daughters could greatly use your prayers, your thoughts. But we will miss him.
Chrissy, it's so nice for you to honor him like that. And what can we do to help his wife and his children?
I
Do you
don't
know?
I don't know right off the top of my head.
So when you do, could you reach out to us individually and let us know? Because, yeah, that has to be a huge loss. I know he was, it kind of came on pretty fast, hard
did.
and fast for him.
Yes, it did.
God bless him.
Yeah.
You guys want to say something?
I can't.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
here for emotional support.
He was even a better friend than he was a water tech.
I know. Thank you all so much for saying something. It's a great loss to the town, for sure.
Yep, Madam Mayor,
Yes,
just
sir.
a couple of things about the situation. A year or so ago, we brought on another technician in the water department with great hopes that our more senior people were looking forward to retirement, and it was very sad that unfortunately, due to health reasons, that didn't happen for Randy. But one of the things about being a city or town manager or whatever is you develop these extended families of your employees and council members, former and present, and while that's such a wonderful thing by virtue of you develop these wonderful relationships with people, you unfortunately also have the flip side of that, and that is that you have a larger group of people that you become close to, and you unfortunately from time to time lose one of them. Notwithstanding his wonderful personality and just joy in working for the town of Beachwater, this was just a really nice human being. I mean, always pleasant, always happy, and our town, our county, we're just a better place for having someone like him here, and he'll be dearly missed by everyone here at Town Hall. And we expressed our condolences on behalf of the town to the family, and we will continue through our Human Resource Department, reach out to them and see what we can do to support them at this particular time. Difficult time, I'm sure, for them. But we appreciate your support for all of our employees, and particularly Randy.
Without getting into any depth, I'm just wondering, you know, this type of benefits, if there's death benefits, if there's something that Randy would have been receiving anyway that maybe we could, that's in our budget and that we could give a small gift from the town, you know, whatever. It
Yeah,
might be nice,
I
'cause
think.
this is a very unusual situation that a current employee with a family would
Right.
pass away.
So, as you may recall, all of our employees, as part of our compensation package, get a life insurance policy equal to 1 times their salary. And we have options for the employees to purchase insurance above and beyond that. But we will reach out to the family and see if there's anything that we could do to assist them at this particular time. And, you know, to the extent that it may require council support or a vote, we'll let you know.
Just trust you're going to look after him like he looked after us.
We're going to look after him like we would look after a family member.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, ladies. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment and move on to the town manager's items. Roger?
So, Madam Mayor, you mentioned it earlier that we heard over the holidays that the county commissioner and staff are ready to reconvene to discuss the base of the bridge, and I believe you're working on trying to
Yes, sir.
get that scheduled.
Is that a meeting for all of us? Is it?
It was going to be a preliminary meeting with Roger and Roger DeJarle and Commissioner Sandelli, but I could ask him, he may want to come in and do a whole presentation, I don't know.
Well,
We'll ask
I would suggest that we have the small meeting first, and then if it looks like there's a viable plan that, you know, would.
What was the topic?
The entrance to the island.
The base of the bridge, as you
Base of the
recall.
bridge.
Okay, I heard bridge, and I was hoping it was going to be the other bridge as well.
No.
Well, I'd like to schedule something for that, too.
Okay, so we can introduce that, Madam Mayor, when we do have this meeting, that we'd like to have a further discussion about the South End Bridge. I'm not really sure if I know it got mentioned about the potential conflict that on Thursday, if that meeting is going to be rescheduled, we do need to take a minute and talk about the January 17th Adopt a Tree program. We'd like to go forward with the program as we presented to the council at the time. At the time, you recall there was a question about potential conflicts if someone planted one of the largest species at the wrong spot. We look back at the program. Mahoganies were going to be in the not the first offering in January, but in the second offering. So we think with the other 2 species that we're going to be offering January 17th, that potential is not really there. So we were going to put this on Thursday's agenda for further clarification, but if that meeting's not going to happen, we would need an approval because we have to order those trees to have them here for the 17th.
Well, I'm the only one that theoretically could not be here. Do we have an agenda yet for Thursday?
Michelle, I believe it's in process or something?
Not the only one that's not going to be here.
We don't have an
I'm not gonna
agenda
be here
yet.
either.
We can reschedule that, but as far as the adopt a tree, I'd say go ahead with that.
Absolutely.
I'd say go ahead with it.
Absolutely. Move ahead with the adopt a
Okay,
tree.
thank you very much. We will, and we appreciate your support on that.
Is anyone else not going to be present on the 9th, or does anybody else have a conflict for the 9th? So it's
I-
just, go ahead.
I have been attending the TDC meetings just because I was thinking that I might step into Mayor Saracita's shoes in March.
Well, that's going to be hard.
But I'm just going for training purposes so that
That's right.
I could hit the ground running hopefully in the future if the future council decides that I would be useful there. So, but I can skip it to be here if
Well, if we
that's
don't
the
have an
will.
agenda, if we don't have an agenda yet, can we move the work session to maybe the 16th?
I think that would be advisable if, and that way we would have everyone here.
Are you back, Ray? Bruce, do you have any conflict?
Doesn't matter if I'm back.
Okay.
I'm in town through March 17th.
Yeah, me too.
If I made the January 16, there is a special magistrate hearing scheduled for 10:30.
Okay, what about January 15th?
January 15th, we have an Anchorage advisory, but I'm sure they would be willing to move that. It's easier to move that than the
And
magistrate.
branding at Bay Oaks at 2 o'clock.
So we would have between perhaps like 10 and 2, because I think Anchorage usually could be done, usually typically done by 10. Would you like to do it between 10 and 2 that day, or less than 2 if we get done?
Fine with me.
Is that the 15th?
That's the
10 to
15th.
2? Yeah, I got it.
January 15 from starting at 10 a.m.?
10 to 2. Okay. Super.
Thank you. So as you may recall, we completed our first quarter of the fiscal year on December 31st. And a preliminary look at those numbers shows that we are we're in terms of pro rata expenditures, we're exceeding our pro rata expenditures in community development and code. However, we are exceeding our revenues on an adequate basis to cover those expenses, but I just wanted to bring that to the council's attention because our options, our option would be that if you wanted to sort of keep to the budget, we would have to curtail certain activities. I do not recommend that because, as I said, we have adequate revenues to cover the over expenditure, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention because that will result, if we continue on this path, that will result in a budget modification at the end of the year.
Why the increased costs?
Well, two reasons. One is, we can't predict how many applications we're going to have and the complexity of them. Two is, we continue to try to meet with people to help them through their projects, and that basically is time when they're not, approving applications and doing things that generate revenue. So basically that the amount of work is greater than we anticipated, and the amount of time being spent on applications is greater than we anticipated. And then, as we continue to work on glitches and rewrites of the LDC and the parking study and all those things also eat into staff time. But as I said, we have the revenues to cover the over expenditures, but I just wanted you to know that we were, or at least from my viewpoint, we are exceeding what was initially budgeted, and I have an obligation to bring that to your attention.
So where were the overages? I thought you said code.
Yeah, I thought you said code too, and then you started talking about community development.
It's code and community development. It's both. They work hand in glove because when someone builds without a permit, it affects code. So, I mean, there's a relationship. When someone does something that's a zoning violation, it affects code. So, but when we call that person in and try to work out a solution, that's part of the thing that's taking staff time.
On the development side, aren't the permits ultimately covering all that cost? I mean,
The permits and the code fines are covering those costs. It's just that we're going to have, if we projected X in revenues, it's going to be X plus, and in expenses, we projected Y, and it's going to be Y plus, and the pluses are balancing out.
I just want to share that I had expressed previously that I thought that we were understaffed in community development. And I was assured that they were going to have more time on their hands because we were going to be hiring that person who was going to do our LDC review so that their time would be available for working on helping the community. So where are we with that?
Okay, so the RFP to hire that company, that takes staff time to set the scope of work and all of that. So that's moving forward. In the meantime, as glitches and issues come up, they're still being dealt with, as was the case earlier today, as well as.
Do you have a
question-
time frame? I guess is what I'm saying, for when this person's going to be
Yeah,
with
well,
us?
I suspect that, I don't know if Amy, I suspect no later than February.
So then there will be, our community development staff will have more time to deal with things, so that might affect the budgetary issues?
It may get better through the remaining 3 quarters of the fiscal year, but I just have an obligation to let you know where we are after the first quarter. The next thing is, I believe the council and I have, and I don't know if something that Council Butcher was going to include in his council member items and reports, but we did receive an email about the traffic situation and I guess request for having the officer at Old St. Carlos and at Estero more than just the weekends. And
This is the North End complaints.
the North End complaint. I will tell you that our agreement for special duty for the foot of the bridge in there is almost $60,000 a year right now. You know, if the council wants us to provide further special details out there and extend those hours beyond that, of course, you know, if that's what council wants, that's what we'll do. But right now, it's only on the weekends at Old St. Carlos and
I personally
Estero.
would like to see what those numbers would look like, because I think the overall impact won't just be for the north end of the island. I think it'll be island-wide relief.
Okay, so do you want to,
Does anybody else want to see that?
it's basically, I could tell you, it's basically $350. It's $350 a day for 4 hours, per 4 hours. That's the cost. So
it's
you want to add in
$700
Fridays to start, and then we could work down the week, or we could do whatever you'd like us to do.
Well, and I
You'd like
think
us to
the thing
extend
that
the
makes-
hours beyond, 12 to 4, we could do that, whatever you would like us to do.
The thing that makes it difficult as well is weather. I mean, if you schedule somebody for during the week and it turns out to be rainy and nobody comes, then you've paid somebody to be there. So I don't know if there's any way we can have some kind of cancellation for weather.
Once the person's, once you requested the person, they're scheduled, you're paying them, at least that's
No
my
way to deal
experience.
that.
There's, because that person is rearranging their schedule to be there.
2 questions. Making that trolley-only lane into, for all the time, right-hand, I mean, that's just a matter of changing paint. Is that something that can be done?
On my list to talk
And
about.
and
to
then
Sandelia
secondly, just, I know we got lap certified and we're going to put a traffic light someday. What's your guesstimate of when someday is? Is that 6 months, 2 years, 5 years? What's that?
Well, our goal is to have that in by, to start construction bidding in July. And I imagine once we award a contract to put that signal in, it'll take 6 months or less.
So by the end of the year.
So hopefully by the end of the calendar year, we could have it done.
So a goal of before next season, the heavy part of next season is the goal.
That would be
So
our
now we have
goal,
to
because
deal
we don't
with
want
this
to, we don't want to do the construction in season.
Right. So now we deal with this season then. And I agree, start with adding Friday, and let's see if we can get that right lane changed to trolley only. I mean, there's so few trolleys. I don't think, and the trolley has to wait in the traffic all the way to
Well,
that
the-
anyway. I don't think it makes much difference.
I don't think it helps unless you double lane the turnoff there on the Estero North. Get rid of those parking
spots.
and make it a turn lane there. Otherwise, you're not moving anything. You're just giving them more space to queue.
Well, I agree, but that probably can't be before next season if we do something with winds or whatever that is and parking spaces behind and then actually change that flow through there. But that's going to be in conjunction maybe by next season.
Why
I don't
is
think
that?
we can do that this season, right?
Why? I don't know.
You can't drive across there the way it is right now. Those parking spots.
I don't know. You may be right. Guess I can look at Google Map and figure it out.
It's curbed and
I
there's
think it's
sidewalk.
curved, yeah. curbed and angled and.
So, the way things work, though, when would we say, somebody take that curb out and do something? Who's going to make that decision? That's the problem around here.
Well, maybe that, what we're saying is maybe that can all be done in conjunction with the traffic light and make aim for next year that it's done.
Yeah, I think that element of it is really, if we have this meeting with Commissioner Sandelli and we work out the foot of the bridge and we know what we're going to do there, then we can talk about how we can do that in advance or as part of that project. But I don't think we could do that until we know what we're doing at the foot of the bridge. But I think it's clearly an idea to facilitate people going right over there is worth pursuing. I think no
So
one
is
would object to
FDOT
that.
going to be in this meeting?
FDOT's position, as they've expressed to me, is very simple. If Lee County and the town of Fort Myers Beach reach a configuration that we're both happy with, their test is pretty simple, and that is that it moves more vehicles than the current plan. And if it's equal or more, they're happy.
Okay.
They just want
because-
to make sure it's not less.
Because they're the ones that also recommended the right turn lane
Yes, they did.
on,
The last meeting,
Fifth Street.
Bruce, was Lee Dot, the county manager, county commissioner, Roger, and myself.
Although I know, I don't know if Lee County does, but I stay in touch with FDOT and I let them know how we're progressing on this, and they're very anxious for us to bring this to conclusion.
I'll also tell you that Commissioner Sandelli is very enthusiastic about the changes.
And when we do that right-hand turn lane, if it entails some agreement with parking spots behind that building, because I don't know who owns what, da-da-da, and we own that center, that's called Center Street, isn't there? Center Street, we also, it might be in conjunction with the county or FDOT. I'm wondering if you come over the bridge and you're on the right-hand side and you're on your bike, okay, so you're flowing with traffic like you should, where you come to Center Street, if we can have it where you pull off there on your bikes and this big long thing, a bike corral, have that be a bike corral area, where you arrive on your bikes, all the bikes go there, and then people aren't crossing over with bikes and everything place else. So I'm wondering if we might, there's going to be some leftover space there, what would that be used for? Just one thought. There may be better thoughts, but it's one thought.
Well, one of the bike locations that we spoke about the last time was the old, where the existing trolley stop is in front of the sandal factory, that would become a bike parking area, because then the trolley stop would move into Crescent Beach. Remember that?
That brings people across that bad intersection.
Yes, it
Whereas
does.
if it's on Center Street, it doesn't.
Yep.
They go there and then they go down, walk on the at the traffic light to go to Times Square. I don't know, another thought. Sorry.
All right, go ahead, Roger.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, just to be clear, is we're going to proceed with Friday coverage there?
There's currently, what, Saturday and Sunday?
Yes.
so why just Friday?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, you want to do it, I'm asking.
Do it every day.
But what's that cost for 3 months? Let's have a cost. so that when we
It's
go-
$350
a
per
day
4
for 4
hours.
hours.
That's what it costs.
Um,
Assuming the sheriff can generate the people to cover the detail.
2 times 30, $10,500 a month. So, yep, $35,000.
All right, do it.
You know what I think? I think we absolutely should do it, because I think it's not just gonna, if it was just for the north end of the island, I don't know how we justify it, but I think it's going to impact the whole island.
It does.
It's gonna move, the flow is gonna move.
And are we doing it, you know how we said we're going to make pedestrians wait longer, both at that, and at Crescent, they need to wait longer too. In other words, cars flow, pedestrians are used to waiting. You go push a button, you wait a little bit. It's not like show up and you get to cross. We want both these people to work in coordination
So this is a
and keep
person
traffic
at
flowing.
Old San Carlos and North Estero and, no, what is this?
This is Old San Carlos and North Estero only, if you want to talk about Crescent and Estero. We found out when we staffed that with an officer, that really didn't help that much. It was the old San Carlos and Estero was the one that helped facilitate traffic flow. But clearly, if you think it will help, we could do that as well.
I was talking about the one at the base of the bridge, so that
Like on
coordinates.
the
but those
pedestrian,
two-
the
pede- yeah.
pedestrian.
Right, what we did there is we shifted the hours that voice works so that when Old San Carlos and North Estero is staffed by the police officer, so is the foot of the bridge, so they're in communication with each other and try to synchronize when traffic flows and when pedestrian moves together.
So if we are paying for someone to be at the intersection of Old San Carlos and North Estero Boulevard, and that's going to be a deputy, then we will also then have a deputy at the light and not a voice volunteer?
Well, we do that right now on the weekends, but I
Because
don't
it's
I
the
believe that will
synchronization
be,
there that's
as we
important.
extend, that's going to be, if I understand their schedule correctly, that's a voice person during the week. It's not an officer.
Difference does it make?
I think that, I don't know, I think that maybe the officers, I don't
Cost
know.
the same, or is the cost different?
It's, officers are more expensive.
Mhm.
So when we say 4 hours, what does 4 hours mean? Does
We
that
pay them
mean-
for 6, so they get hours travel time to and from, and they're
No,
on
what
site
4
for.
hours are they doing?
Right now, the 4 hours they're doing are from, starting at noon till 4.
How do you know whether that's a good idea?
You know,
I would think
I know
most
no
peop-
matter what we do, it's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
So,
Again, if you're going to encourage people to get here early and, that's,
I thought most of the traffic came over from the north in the morning, like, 10 o'clock. I don't.
We also want to benefit people leaving the island.
so how about,
Or the
if
other
we
way.
have moved why don't we agree to do this? And I'll have a conversation with Mr. Washulis at the Pink Shell and some other North End people, and we'll see what hours they
Crescent,
think,
in
and the
that
Crescent,
area.
yeah.
Or not Crescent, I keep saying Crescent, Old San Carlos.
And I'll get back with Roger on it.
Yep.
How does that sound?
Why don't you invite the people that have been complaining as of late? There's a couple of them that were very vocal about that and seem to know what the times are.
Ron
Yeah.
Landisi,
Yeah, there's an
Condo
email of
Association,
about 15 people, I would say, that are been communicating with us about that.
We'll figure that out. Okay. Anything else, Roger?
That covers the topics that I needed to cover this morning. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Roger before we move on? All right, let's go on to town attorney's items.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. First and foremost, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year
Hope
to
you
you, too.
all had an enjoyable holiday season. Just a couple of brief items. I will be distributing to all of you before the end of the month quarterly report on the status of all pending litigation, and we'll get that out to you, as well as just kind of update of where we're at in first quarter overall. I did send to you all an email regarding some pending litigation that has been resolved favorably to the town, some federal lawsuit that was initiated by Mr. LeBlanc, pro se litigant. So that, unless he pursues any additional appeals, that matter is essentially over. And other than that, if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Herron?
I have one. I know that you said you were going to do a chart for us for the election on the different four-year terms, November versus March, and the different options of what transpired. I'm wondering when we might get that.
We'll have it. I'm going to work with the clerk to take the one that we've already produced, to pare it down and just basically make it hey, as opposed to seats, just simply, if it passes, this is what happens. If it doesn't, this is what happens.
Okay, town council members' items. Bruce?
All right, well, I'm going to go back to the traffic discussion since I wasn't looking at my notes there. Again, why don't we have our base people trained to direct traffic and not rely on the Lee County Sheriff?
Okay,
I say base people, whoever people.
Okay, so we can cover this. This is how it basically works. Whoever is the law enforcement entity, they make a determination who could do traffic control. So since we use the sheriff's office, they make the determination of who can do traffic control. And their position, as I understand it to date, is only their trained people can do traffic control.
So if we have them train our people, you say they are trained, so if they train ours, does that work?
I don't believe that that will work, but we can double check by inquiring.
Let's do that, please.
I can think of all kinds of examples where we've had, I mean, even the road project, you've got people directing traffic that certainly aren't voice or sheriff's department.
Yeah,
And-
that's, so
but-
typically, so just so you understand, typically when you have a road project and you authorize a contractor to work in a segment, part of that contract requires them to submit a maintenance of traffic plan that's approved. And when that plan is approved, they basically take jurisdiction over that segment of the road.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Got some pretty sorry traffic directors, I'll tell you that right now. But that's just my opinion.
Okay. So on the streetlight situation, where are we at on that? Last time I recall, we were going to invite the consultant to come back again.
Yeah, since our last meeting over the holidays, I don't know that we've been able to nail down a date, but we're working on it.
Do you know how long the free streetlight program lasts?
You're talking about the rebate, the power rebate program? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, the government thing for reducing carbon footprint or whatever it is, where they provide free lighting for us.
I don't know the deadline, but we can ask.
Could we please resolve this? This has been a priority of Bruce's since he came on the town council. And I would really like to see us, this council, come to a conclusion on this prior to March 1st. It shouldn't be impossible to accomplish. It's been kicked down the aisle too many times, and I don't want to see our terms end without this particular issue that Bruce has been talking about for 3 years being resolved.
And there's absolutely no rebate when you're on a barrier island with state regulations for any other kind of light. I mean,
Well, not only that, but you know what, last night, and I was coming back onto the island from the south end the sun was down, which, by the way, was at a spectacular sunset last night.
It was.
I almost hit 2 different people in crosswalks because I truly did not see them. Our road is perilous. We encourage people to have all of these multimodal uses, your bike, your feet, your skates, your whatever, your pony, and yet it is so dark on Estero Boulevard that people don't realize how in peril they are. I mean, I've got pretty decent vision. I was going the speed limit. I wasn't preoccupied with a phone or anything else. And twice last night, I almost hit somebody.
I will
Twice.
continue to say it's unbelievable that Lee County can provide a major road like this, a hurricane evacuation route, the #1 income provider, and not have to provide lights that meet state regulations.
You can do it right now, just
Yeah,
3
but they-
people put their hands up and it's done.
But they don't meet the regulations for turtles.
Oh, baloney. That's somebody's fantasy.
If you lived on the beachfront and your neighbors were getting charges of $40,000 for turtle disorientations when there's bright streetlights all around you, you'd feel differently. Where's our balance? I don't know.
Because the one disorientation that they're blaming on the streetlight, which probably happened, the streetlight was not perpendicular to the beach. The arm was parallel to the beach, and it was right near the beach. It shouldn't have been on. It shouldn't have been positioned like that. I do not believe that these new lights, the way they are configured, based on what the experts have told me, are going to be a problem for the turtles. End of story. And if Lee County, as your wishes, said, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to put those free streetlights in there, then what would you say? You're going to say, well, geez, I'm concerned about the turtles. I'm concerned about the turtles too, but I do not believe that these lights are going to be a turtle problem because of the way
Madam
they're
Mayor?
engineered.
Yes, sir. February, first meeting in February.
Well, please feel free to tell me to be quiet, but here's what I really think you should seriously consider. One is that if we went forward and put in the LED safety lighting, and we found out that there were turtle problems at a location or multiple locations, those lights could be turned off at those locations, and we still have the benefit of good safety lighting for 8 months. The other alternative is for us to do the mix of the amber lights and the white lights, and adjust it seasonally. If you're looking for a miraculous solution beyond that, I really don't know that there's one out there, to be honest with you.
I simply want this town council to make a decision on the lighting, because I personally am also a fan of the turtles, but if I'm going to pick turtle over pedestrian, I'm picking pedestrians. And as we continue to encourage people to get out of their cars, we have to provide for their safety. And it shouldn't be unsafe for people to walk down Estero Boulevard and cross the street at 6:30 at night. If it was 2 o'clock in the morning, okay, but this was at 6:30. So this has to be a priority to have it resolved. Go ahead, Bruce.
I read something the other day, and shame on me, I cannot remember where I read it. I should have made a note of it, but anyhow, it was an ordinance in one of the towns around here, I believe, that said you may not plant a tree where the mature height of that tree will have an interference with the power line. And I think we ought to add that ordinance, if I'm not making that up, if somebody could find that. It might have been Cape
I'd
Coral.
strongly disagree. People can trim their trees and keep them to a site that doesn't interfere with the power lines.
They
So-
can, but they don't.
Well, but that could be something that we should enforce.
Well, so what's wrong with having a tree restriction so that it doesn't happen? That doesn't mean that you,
People's yards are like postage stamp size. So if you say that they can't put a tree that's going to interfere with the power lines, that limits them to almost no trees, except palm trees. And I think then you are punishing the responsible people who do hire tree trimmers, like me. I'm constantly having somebody out. That's not fair to punish me when I am being responsible and keeping my trees trimmed.
well, the problem with that theory is that if it is a responsible person, then they're going to penalize everybody else in their neighborhood when a storm comes in and it knocks the trees, power lines down. And I tell you, it is, if you just walk around some of the neighborhoods, my neighborhood in particular, it's terrible. There's so many examples out there that are a problem.
Well, there's also examples of line of sight where you can't pull out of streets. There are a lot of problems with landscaping, and those aren't tall trees. I mean, you're either a
I agree.
responsible shrub and tree
Right.
property owner or you're not.
Bill Van Duzer, I'll be darned.
Oh, my gosh.
Take a seat, Mr. Mayor. Didn't Charlotte from FPL have some commentary on this at the last meeting? I can't remember what it was she said. I was just going to look to see if I could find something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
just to
sir.
refresh your memory, clearly, FPL does not want us to have to spend money trimming trees that may grow into their power line. So they're going not only say that you can't plant within a certain distance, but they're going to add a safety factor, assuming the person's going to mismeasure and other things like that, because that's a recurring expense that, of course, they would prefer to avoid. If the problem got so bad and so expensive in terms of their tree trimming activity, at some point, there might be, I don't believe it would, but at some point it may encourage them to go underground voluntarily. But right now, their position is if you want to go underground, you have to pay for it. That being said, the plenty of people have a whole variety of different trees on their property, and they're meticulous about the look of their property and take care of it and make sure that to the extent, because they don't want FP&L to trim it because they basically do a hatchet job around the wire, and that's pretty much all they do. They're not trimming the tree aesthetically. So if you care about the look of your property, you're not going to wait for FP&L to come out and trim it. You're going to trim it yourself. But then again, there's also a lot of people who they look at their property and say, look, the less I have to spend on property maintenance is a good thing, and I'm not going to spend any penny more than I have to. So those tend to be the overgrown properties that have other aesthetic and code-related issues. I always hope that we don't have to get to the lowest common denominator in code enforcement. We always hope that we have a better community than that, but sometimes I guess we have to put those safety rails in.
Okay, Bruce, you're finished. Ray.
I have one item, which I need your help with, council, and it concerns March. As you all know, St. Patrick's Day this year falls on, as every year, on the 17th, which is also Election Day here on the beach. So that day is ruled out for the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Saturday prior to that, on the 15th, is the Shrimp Fest Parade. So that's ruled out. So my question is, and I spoke with Roger about this earlier, I know, Joanne, you didn't want to have a meeting later because that would be your last meeting, and I can appreciate that. So I was hoping that maybe we could have the meeting on the 16th, if that's in fact the day we want to have the meeting, a little later in the day, like 1 or 2 o'clock, as opposed to the morning, which Roger seemed to think would be even better for the staff. Now, looking at my calendar here for March, I don't have anything written down. Maybe the clerk can help me what the schedule looks like. I don't have anything written down on the 2nd for a meeting of March. Is that right? Or maybe I just don't have it written down.
It would be a regular, that would be the 2nd, the 5th, and the 16th would be the March meetings.
2nd, the 5th?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So FMB meeting here on the, okay. So we've got the 2nd and the 16th as far as the council meetings themselves.
I don't have a problem starting the meeting later in the day.
Would that work?
Are you saying you're doing that so you can have the parade on the 16th? And they're going to have another parade on the 15th? Do you want to have the two parades one day apart?
Well, that wouldn't be my preference, and this only happens like once every 10 years, as I recall. It's certainly not my preference, but
Is there a reason? Why can't it be on Election Day, by the way? Is that really
well, the
big a
reason is
problem?
because the parade terminates in the parking lot of the church,
And the church is
a polling place.
Can you terminate at the Women's Club instead this year?
Well, I thought about that, but that extends the parade and further into the construction zone, what have you. And it's also Election Day. I mean, we're trying to get people down to the polls, and it sort of complicates it, I would think. I thought of it too, Joanne. It's a valid idea, but I don't think
I am here through the entire month of March and into April until whatever I'm available, any day, any time for the rest of this term. So whatever you want to do, have at it.
Yes, my thought is, I'd like to see the parade separated more. Could you do the parade like the 20th or the 21st?
well,
But it always happens it always happens, the Shrimp Festival is always either a few days or maximum a week separated from.
Really?
Yeah,
I thought they were
always-
usually a week apart.
Well, maybe a week like max.
but there are times when, as I say, when they don't typically butt up like this.
Yeah,
And they
especially
would,
one-
and they
one
would not
weekend and the
have,
next weekend.
they would not have had it not been for Election Day falling on the 17th. So therein lies the conundrum. So it seems that the fix would be to have it that morning of the 16th and meet with the council later on that day.
I'm willing to do that.
Or we could reschedule the 16th meeting to, the 18th or the 19th.
Then
that's after the
that's after the election.
Oh, of course, that's right. I don't
Okay,
want, that's
so
right. We don't want
let's-
to do that.
Let's move the 16th meeting to, well, let me just throw out one other idea. Can we move the 16th meeting could go to the 13th? Is that easier for everybody? Or,
It would certainly be easier to get here, because I'm picturing trying to get here after the parade from my house.
or the 9th, look at the week before instead of the 16th.
Except that you have one scheduled for the 2nd, so it would be, but I'm game for the 13th. I mean, if.
What about the 13th?
I'm game for the 13th.
Bruce?
I'd rather have the 12th.
You'd rather have the 12th?
12th works better for me, too. I do have a conflict, but I'll do either.
We may have TBC.
I'm okay with the 12th, too.
Yeah, I think we're going to have the
Thursdays are not good.
Yeah, let's do the 13th. Let's do, do you
Friday
mind?
the 13th.
Friday the 13th will be our last, well, that'll just be nice, won't it? Okay, council.
Thank you very much for that.
Yes, sir.
For accommodating
And we'll keep
that.
it at our regular time.
9 a.m.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you.
Anything else?
Aaron Gobra.
Okay. Roxanne?
And I'm making a note so I go home and change my schedule. Two minor things. Our traffic camera was out of service a while ago, and then we got it back up online, and now it's out of service again, and our website says that it's out of service, and when I spoke to Colton about it, he said that we had lightning damage, et cetera, et cetera. I'm worried that by the time we get new parts in, that season will be over and the traffic camera will not be fixed. And I'm just advocating that if there's a temporary fix you can do during season, that those cameras are operating. I know I and many other people find it very beneficial to plan my day traffic-wise, that I can look at that camera. And I'm just worried that we're going to order new equipment and it's not going to get here till April.
I spoke with Bob Bogart first thing this morning and told him to get the electrical issues resolved so we can get the cameras back up. So he has that as a priority.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing I had noted was the MRF recommendations regarding lizards. I would like to see whether Roger would like to put that on an MMP or just get some leanings from us today.
I think I prefer to put it on MP to better analyze the impacts if staff were going to accept some responsibility.
Okay, so I just want to say that I'm in favor on behalf of that committee of placing that on the next MMP agenda that's not too overly crowded.
Can I just ask what kind of discussion we're going to have about it?
Whether it's private or public, whether we're going to find people that,
Okay.
if someone calls into town hall and says, I have an iguana problem, are we going to give them a phone number to call Joe the iguana trapper? Or are we going to provide traps with training? Or are we going to train staff?
Okay.
Yeah, just to slightly rewind the tape, just so everyone remembers the context. I received one email from a citizen, a property owner, who said that they didn't want to spend money to pay for a private trapper and wanted the town to do something about it. And I said that I would bring the matter forward to the council for discussion. That's what kicked off this whole issue. So the council decided to give it to the committee to look at. The committee looked at it, they gave you their report, and in that report, they're suggesting that one of the alternatives is for staff to assume some additional responsibilities, and I just need to be able to quantify the effort that might take and the costs that that might involve, so that you're better informed as you go forward to make a decision.
Joanne?
I don't think the town should be providing a service that the private sector can. And I know in my house, if I have rats, if I need trees trimmed, if I need grass mowed, whatever, there's providers for that. It's my responsibility to take care of it. People may not take care of the iguana on their own property, even though it's undermining their seawall, they're going to wind up paying for the seawall. Well, then, if it gets to the next person's property, then maybe they will. I think the town takes care of its own property, and we have a list of providers and some information that when people call, and we obviously absolutely publicize it. I cannot, you know, that this
I'm
is
just
so
asking
far.
that we put it on an MMP that we
Well, I
can
don't
all-
want to. I mean, I don't want to bother talking about it if the agreement is among council that town council, that the town staff is not going to wind up being lizard chasers.
I thought Roger requested that we put it on an MMP because he wanted to get additional information.
You asked if we can. That was
I
his
asked if that's
response.
what he wanted to do.
I'm okay for it to go on an M&P, Rexanne.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll discuss it then. Anything else, Rexanne?
No, thank you.
Okay, Joanne?
Sorry, it's a long list, but it's quick. Three things that I had complaints on, you know, since the month we've been gone. One was proliferation of signs. There's a lot of sandwich signs out again. There's a lot of cars parking with their advertising out on the street, and oversized for sale signs. So I'll just add those to your list, Roger. Then I also had, we all, I think, got a letter that was forwarded us to regarding someone who complained, a visitor who complained they got hit by a bike, or someone got hit by a bike on the sidewalk. We're seeing many electric bikes on the sidewalks. We're seeing bikes on the sidewalks where bike lanes are available. We're seeing bikes come in both directions in the same sidewalk. Instead of going with traffic, they're going, and I'm not sure what signage, what enforcement, how we fix that, but we're not even in season yet. People are getting hit, and we want more bikes. That's the whole idea, but we can't have a free-for-all. So I'm not sure. I know that, I don't know that the sheriff is going to do that. It's Lee County's street. What's the solution, and how do we, you know, what do we do?
There's no solution, to be perfectly honest. There are just things that we could work on. Education of the bike shops, education of our residents. You know, I think the idea that, that we or the sheriff can stop bad behavior, bad habits of bicyclists is probably something that's going to be extremely difficult. All we could do is try to educate people to do the thing that's safe for them and safe for pedestrians.
Do our base guys have the ability to stop and find someone riding an electric bike on the sidewalk?
No.
Golf carts, I mean, golf carts.
Can-
Don't
can
get me
they?
started on those.
Can they?
Oh, my God, golf course.
No.
Well, and, okay, and then one other thought then, sorry, but in the downtown, where
They
there
can
is,
stop and educate, but that's all they can do.
in the downtown, where there is no, in our downtown zoning district, where there are no bike lanes, and it is share the road with the bikes, on the sidewalk where it is so congested, should we have get off and walk? At least in that section, that's what I'm most concerned about. I'm less concerned the rest of the island, but in that highly congested area. So I throw that out. I don't know, maybe it's something for bike.
I'm gonna throw this at you, Joanne. I think because it is so congested there, people are more careful. It's the guy who's riding, like, in your neighborhood, zippity-doo-dah-daying down the road, down the sidewalk I mean, again, last night I saw one, and I'm thinking, and they're like Rexanne's Prius. You don't hear them coming. It's just boom, they're all of a sudden on top of
It's
you.
a daily occurrence with me, a daily occurrence, walking the dog. They'll tell you at the last minute, I'm up on here on your left, I'm on your right. Really? As you're about to run me over and the dog, that's when you warn me that they're coming? So, but I look the other way at this time of year because of the road construction and everything else. They're really taking their lives in their hands being out on that boulevard on their bicycles. So as the alternative, they put our lives in danger by trekking down the sidewalk.
And we also
So
have a-
it will improve eventually when we have
We
those
have it on
8-foot
the beachfront more and more too, and I know because I just ride a regular bike along there and the little kids zip in and out, but there's a teenager now who rides an electric hoverboard that's got a ball on it. He rides it down the center of the highway and he rides it up and down the beach. That thing must go 30, 40 miles an hour. It looks like Back to the Future, but it's just,
I have a suggestion about the downtown area. I would like to see us put a stripe on the sidewalk that says bicycles to the right, so that you don't know whether they're coming on the right or the left. They're supposed to be on the right side of the sidewalk. The sidewalks were supposedly made wider because they were sharing the space. So at least that would help. I don't think it's a solution, but it might help.
We could talk to Lee County and about, marking their sidewalk, and we could see what we could do in our right away.
Dangerous. It's very dangerous.
but and the reason I mention this is because of that complaint, but I know you're meeting with Sandelli too, and maybe it could just be safety. Boulevard safety is one of your things that you talk about, those issues.
You can put up those signs for education, but again, if the sheriff won't stop people and give them a ticket, putting up a right side only thing isn't going to help. Somebody's got to start enforcing good behavior.
It works though, like at it, Bruce, the Strand out in Hermosa Beach and the beaches out in California. On that Strand, there's a bike lane, there's a walking, and there's people, and they have cops on bicycles, and if you're out of there on a bike, they nail you right there, and that's how they enforce it, But how do you do that on a
I think it's a start.
7 mile long
to
aisle?
paint the line as a start, and then.
I agree.
The safety committee has discussed this with Lee County, I know, with at least Rob, about putting up a sign, and also a sign to say, allow 3 feet for the bicyclists in that Sherrill area. And I was talking to a guy the other night that rides his bike all the time, and he says, well, the thing that I'm find that when I go in that Sherrill lane, the cars squeeze me. They don't like me passing them. And, that's another thing. I mean, the sheriff is sitting there at the donut shop, the 7-Eleven all the time. What a perfect place to be trying to enforce stuff. I mean, that's the most egregious spot in the city, and all he's got to do is get his little book out and start making
Well,
that
I would
message.
like to see them, we all know that there are times that we see several sheriff cars all in a particular parking lot. I would like to see them spread out in several different parking lots, and they could provide some of these kinds of service.
And I was the only council member who attended the meeting with the sheriffs when they offered us their time, and they explained to me that that's often occurring at shift changes, that they gather together and exchange information, like, we've been watching a particular area, we warned this guy not to do that, you need to go back there during your shift. So just because you see more than one sheriff's car parked in a particular location doesn't mean they're goofing off.
No, I don't think they're goofing
So-
off, but no matter what, they're always at one spot, and maybe we could have a little variety.
Right, but if they're not enforcing the law, it doesn't matter whether they're at every 100 feet. And when I say the law, our ordinances being the law.
Okay, what's next, Joanne?
Well, and Ray shook his head too. We have this proliferation of golf carts, and they're a lot of fun. I mean, people are riding around, and when they're licensed and in the roadway, and they're supposed to be, but what's happened is there's a lot of them unlicensed, and they're almost all unlicensed, and they're up on the sidewalk, and then there's no way to identify or make them to be compliant. I'm not sure what we do about it, though, and once again, it seems to be a sheriff issue, because I don't think we have an ability to do that. And
then
we're going to have more and more of them, because the rental houses are starting to have them as part of their rental thing. Hey, and we've got a golf cart you can drive around on.
No, we've got to put a handle on this soon, because it's getting out of hand. And then to avoid you at the last moment on the golf cart, when it's wet, nice and soupy and everything else in the right-of-way, they'll veer out into the right-of-way in front of the movie theater or in front of wherever it is, and tear up all the lawn there, and think nothing of it as they go through. So they're out of hand. These golf carts are out of hand, I'll tell you that.
Okay, and another complaint I got was that supposedly, as each section of the boulevard is complete, they do their, what do they call their point list? Punch list, thank you, their punch list, and make sure everything's complete. And we still have the fence issue at Red Coconut. That was a month ago, we talked about that last, we had another complaint. Have they come in yet about their fence, their landscaping, whatever they're gonna do? Because the county said, they stated that the fence will remain until an agreement is reached and that's a town function with Red Coconut.
The answer is I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that, that we've talked to Fran Myers about expediting their plan. So that conversation has happened, but where exactly it is, I don't know.
Can we put a time limit on that? First of all, I have to say, I love Fran and Tom Myers, and the reason I live on Fort Myers Beach is because we always came in our RV, so I love the whole thing. But it doesn't meet the code, and we need to attend to it.
Well, we'll reach out to them and find out where they're at.
That'd be great. And then one other thing, a while back, Leaky Tiki Barbecue, when they came in about the noise, and they still seem to be functioning with a bazillion bar chairs and whatever, but I don't know, has that noise issue been taken care of? And what came forward seemed to disappear. It came forward in June of 2019, and then it seemed to all disappear, and then it's never come back.
I'll check with the planning and zoning folks. The last thing I had heard before I went on vacation was that they were trying to schedule a date to come back in front of town council, but I'll confirm that, and we'll let you know.
And then the last thing was actually for Roxanne. I know that you had talked about, you were going to do something on special events, and then also on the churches.
I have appeared before the LPA to discuss I'm going to call them houses of worship. I'm trying to use the appropriate terminology. The LPA seemed to be interested in the idea that we needed to go forward with something. So that is in progress. Number two, as far as the special events is concerned, I've had multiple meetings with Patty and Sarah. I spent part of my Christmas break rewriting the special events wording, and I have reached out to Mr. Heron for his assistance on that. I have completed all of it with the exception of one section that I haven't figured out where is the best place to put. And so I put that aside over my Christmas break, but it is nearly complete.
Because I was just wondering when we can get those on an M&P, because that's things that we talked about we were going to be doing.
I had not planned whether it would go on an MMP or directly to, that would be up to Roger to determine. I'm going to finish writing it. I'm going to go over it with Sarah and Patty one more time, and then send it to John for his final look over legally, and then they'll decide how they introduce it to us, whether they think it's controversial enough that it needs an MMP, or whether, I think a lot of the things that I have done are not controversial.
I would suspect with special events, since we've all chimed in on this in the past and talked about concerns and things that have happened,
times. Yeah.
that you may be right, that one may be able to go on. The one with houses of worship, I would like to have that on an MMP, hear what you have in mind specifically. When I think about that, I like to think, okay, in all these uses, our table of uses, which uses is it that you're thinking about? And I would think it would save time for community development and for you to have some feedback initially, get some gut reaction on that. So that's really kind of a very new topic, and I would love to see that on an M&P for conversation.
My memory was that the LPA sent it back to staff for more information and more I just introduced the idea that I thought it was an issue that needed to be dealt with. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty in any detail, and the nitty-gritty is detailed enough that it's necessary for the staff, I think, to bring back something more detailed to the LPA before it comes to us.
But normally we M&P these things and then it goes to the LPA, so there's not some wasted time. So I'm just wondering if we could, you know what I mean? because it does save staff time, LPA time, and everything to get some feedback.
I don't care what order it happens in.
Does anybody else
Sure,
support
I'll be
bringing it
glad,
to
I'll be glad
MMP?
to agree with you to bring
But
that on.
again, the staff needs to do some work on it before
Okay.
they can bring it in.
But we get it to an MMP in maybe February or something?
Let's
Okay.
hope so.
Okay,
Because
thank
we're
you.
running out of time. Okay, anything else, Joanne?
That's it for me. Thank you for listening.
Let's see, we might have taken care of everything I have here. Roger, so for the public's knowledge, the group RMA, who is the consulting agency that's working on this logo, branding, whatever we want to call it, there will be a public meeting from 3 to 5 on January 15th, and that's at Bay Oaks.
Correct.
So 3 to 5. I have 3 here. Is it at 2 or at 3?
I turned off my phone. so
I've
I'll
got
have to look.
2 on my calendar.
It might be, I think 2 is in my memory, but we'll get that confirmed.
And I'd love to see a lot more publicity. I mean, today's the 6th already. This should be on Facebook, on our email blast, our town newsletter.
Okay. So, Roger,
You know, that
could you-
PIO could be doing that.
Yeah, well, here we are. So, okay, can we decide whether or not it's 2 or 3 o'clock? If it's 2 o'clock, great. But either way.
Amy's signaling 2. She's the one who's scheduled
Amy
that.
is signaling 2. Okay, so hopefully we'll have a lot of people show up for that. That would be.
Are you showing us 3, Michelle? I see you're nodding your head.
I'm looking at the calendar, and it's listed as 2:30.
There you go.
There you
Maybe
go.
we could get a clarification of that so Gary and Nathan can get it right in the paper for people to come to that. We did discuss the north end traffic. So that was done. Could we get has the schedule changed at all for follow-up meetings with RMA for us? I know they're going to be there, they're going to be there on the 15th, and then how many, are they coming back to us?
My understanding is after the meeting on the 15th, they're going to, the next step would be to bring back a couple of alternatives for the council to look at.
Okay. I brought up the Tops property. Can we require them to close that property?
We could take a look at what's going on the property and see if we can get them to work collaboratively with us, and if not, we'll look at what we can do in the code compliance.
Okay. Roger, do we have an update on the landscape plan for Estero Boulevard? Or are we just still at the, here's the money, when are we going to get the money? How are we going to go about, I mean, obviously, we're not going to go about it. Ray and Rexanne will have an opportunity to do that, but how will that landscape plan come about? Do you know?
Well, here's what I can tell you that I do know. The county has informed us that their landscaping budget for the project is approximately just a hair over $800,000. They has said to us that they're willing to turn that money over to the town to implement the landscaping and, of course, the subsequent maintenance that would be the resulting of whatever landscaping we've put in. We've asked them 2 follow-up questions. One question is, would the county consider allowing us to plant, basically not be under their permit for the planting, but allow us to plant what we think is appropriate, and assume the liability if we decide that we want to put something a little closer to a corner or something than perhaps they would like. And they said they would contact the county attorney and see if they could work out that issue. And then the third issue was that since the county would be spending some money on maintenance in perpetuity, if they did the landscaping, to see if they would agree to some amount of money to reimburse the town to offset our future maintenance costs. And they said they would take that under advisement, and we're waiting for an answer on that. But all that being said, I believe by the time we get together with Commissioner Sandelli and the county manager, we should have an update on both of those issues.
Okay.
Anita?
Yes.
At some point on the record, Doug had stated that the budget was $1 million.
I remember that. That's why
I just
the
state to you, I can
800,000
give you
number
the-
just,
the-
yeah, he said it was about $1 million.
I can give you the date on that, but it was stated to us as $1 million, just on the record by county.
John, do you have any update on all of the Denora Canal vacations? And you were you were going to redo the ordinance. Do you know when we might see that?
You'll see the ordinance at next meeting.
Okay.
The staff and I are working together on a letter to send out to the property owners along Denora, giving them their options based upon the conversations that staff has had with you all. Whether or not they take advantage of the potential new regulations or not, it's still, here's what needs to be done, here's the anticipated costs, and that will be going out shortly. Mr. Green obviously is not here today, but I will be communicating with him electronically to try and get that out by the end of this week.
Okay. And
Just, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
There are two issues. One is the rewrite of our vacation process, and then, based on the council's decision with respect to that, how that affects the vacation of Denora. So we have a little pause in the letter to wait to see how that first issue
Okay, I
plays out.
understand. Okay. So then, Roger, the two emails that we got about residents coming in and then being told to go home and email the staff, can you just tell us what the policy is when somebody walks into town hall?
The policy very simply is this, that we do encourage people to make appointments whenever possible so that staff can better, work uninterrupted and get all their appointments in a row versus to stop what they're doing every time someone walks in the door. That being said, there are certain issues when the person walks in the door have to be addressed right now because the item is timely. It has to be looked at right now because something is going on, such as if someone is walking in to say, there's a code violation happening right now, we can't say make an appointment for next week. We have to address that right now. So Michelle and I exchanged some emails about that, and we're going to sit down with the front desk staff and at Wednesday's staff meeting with our leadership to help them understand that a little bit of screening on the front end, a little more flexibility on the back end to address the public coming in.
Just to add to that, I've noticed for a long time there's been a sign on the front door that says there's walk-in times 2 days a week. So they know when they walk in the door, if they look at that sign, that there are certain days you're supposed to come for walk-ins. And other than that, you're kind of taking a chance to walk up to the desk and say, do you have time to see me today? I think the reasonable alternatives being offered. And now, it might be good to publicize that more, that what days the walk-in times are.
Yeah, one of the cases that we had was a person was trying to walk in to report that the pool heater next to their house was too loud. And the person was told there was no one available and they had to make an appointment and they left. And I subsequently followed up with the person, talked to them on the phone. We immediately sent someone out and to check the noise level, and we couldn't record a noise that approached our noise ordinance, although they felt it was disruptive. And we advised the person of that, and they have now written an email saying, there's no way you could have sent a person out because it was too loud. So in any event, that being what it is, we will reach back out to the person and call us again the next time they feel the noise is generated just too loud, and we will recheck it again, and we'll show them the actual meter number while we're doing it to hopefully allay their concern.
The whole basis of my comment here is, I think I said to you in an email, is that, we have talked now for 6 years that I've been here about this world-class service that we wish to give to our residents. And when a resident comes in, takes the time to get in their car and the traffic and everything else and come into town hall for whatever their purpose is, for them to be sent away to go back to send an email to me is insulting. And believe me, I understand, because it happens to me a lot in my business that, people want to talk to me and I'm like, they don't realize that I'm there to work, but there has to be, and hopefully you'll achieve some happy medium so that somebody isn't taking their time to come here and being told to go home and email us. The people that I have spoken to that this happened to were really upset about it. And in a way, rightfully so. It just seemed ridiculous, but go ahead.
Anyway, so I'm just going to close by saying that notwithstanding the fact that we're going to go over it with the front desk staff and we're going to go over it with our directors on Wednesday, for Gary and Nathan and anyone else who might be listening or watching subsequently, I probably eat at my desk 99% of the time. And if someone comes in and whether they've tried to use the system and they're dissatisfied with how their matter, or they just want to jump to the top, I'm here and available by person, phone, email, or whatever to hear and address their concerns. So,
Okay. Roger, can you give me an update on the two houses next to Junkanoo?
I don't know the current status, because Bob had been away when I got back from my vacation. He's here this morning. The last I heard that everything was okay other than the pool permit, I want to say. So I know Mr. Orlandini was in the building last week, and he didn't seek me out to speak about any issues with regard to that property.
Okay.
So, but I will check with Mr. Bogart after this meeting.
Okay. And let us know. Yes, John?
Yeah. Because of my involvement, I make it a point to take a look at that property every time I have a chance to go by it. So this morning on my way into Town Hall, I eyeballed it pretty closely. There is work going on. There's a dumpster out in front that is semi-filled with construction material. So it does appear that they're in the process of implementing the terms and conditions of the settlement agreement. And so we will, either through the manager, through my involvement to the extent that it becomes necessary, keep you all updated on the implementation of the settlement agreement. But it is moving forward. It has taken a little bit longer than I think any of us had anticipated, but in part that's due to the need for additional information from the property owner that was slow in coming in, but we're getting there.
And they need a DO or permit to be working though?
So there's, just so everyone's aware, there's two thresholds. One is for them to get their permitting, and one of them is to complete. In my opinion, the date that they have to complete is very favorable to them in terms of giving them plenty of time. So they have, our obligation is to get them a permit and then do timely inspections, and so they meet their completion date. But how fast they work once they get the permits is up to them. We can't
Okay.
control that.
Thank you all very much.
Should I just real quick say?
Yes,
I
please.
found the information, the walk-ins for the building department, just because I know there's lots of people who watch this, believe it or not. Wednesdays and Thursdays between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. And that's for Gary also to print. Wednesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 2 for walk-ins. You know there'll be somebody available.
Before we adjourn, I noticed Mr. Van Duzer was here. He's not in the room now, but did we want to, was he here for a particular reason, or
He's
were we
here.
just?
He's here to meet with me and this gentleman about something that I don't even know what it's about. But I said, of course I'll meet with him. Yeah, I guess he's out there. Jane Plummer took him out.
Former mayor.
Former mayor,
so-
former LPA member. Bill's contributions to the town of Fort Myers Beach cannot be underestimated.
It's just nice to see him
Yes,
today.
it's very nice to see him. Nice to have him in the house. Anybody else, anything? If not, we stand
to adjourn.
adjourned at 12:31 p.m.
Second.
Woo, it was chilly. Nothing Thursday, yeah, right. Right.
Bring it back.